Okay. Well, that was, he told me weeks ago, but I haven't heard from him since. Trials, yeah.
It's like we're at the airport, people flying away from the gate, go, go, go.
Rick was questionable. But, yes, I spoke to Jerry last night. Hi, Mrs. Heenan. Former board member, in case you don't know, Bernadette Heaton. You awake? Did you get your coffee? I have 8:59 on my computer, Mr. Bauer.
I have 9 o'clock on my computer.
Okay, all right, let's start. We are going to begin. This meeting is a public session of the Council Rock School Board of Directors. This meeting is being recorded by the Council Rock School District and may be recorded by members of the audience. Could we please stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have a roll call, please.
Hey, Bob, will you take off the screen, please?
Mrs. Brooks,
Here.
Mr. Bialik,
Here?
Dr. Foster.
I believe he's on his way,
Yeah.
so please note when he arrives.
Okay. Mr. Grupp.
He is also on his way.
Mrs. McKessie.
Here.
Mrs. Sexton on the way. Oh, here.
Thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Thomas.
Here.
Mr. Block.
Here?
Mr. Abramson. He's on his way too.
I don't know if Mr. Abramson will be attending, so we'll just note that when he does arrive. Do you have a superintendent's report? No, okay. A couple things about today's meeting. The purpose and intention of today's meeting was a board workshop, so this board could come together and coalesce some of the ideas and work through some of the capital planning things that have been presented to them. So in effort to stay on track with that, we will be limiting public comment to 30 minutes at the beginning of the meeting. And I don't know how much time we'll have at the end of the meeting, but we won't start public comment any later than 11:30, which would allow for 30 minutes at the end. Please note, we are also having meetings, and those meetings are for the purpose of public comment. So we expect a great deal of public comment, and there will not be those restrictions on those meetings, and they are virtually every Thursday night in October. So at public comment, it is basically an opportunity for you to address the board. We ask that you limit your comments to no longer than 3 minutes. There is a timer on that, and particularly because we are restricting the overall time, I would really ask you to please stick to the 3 minutes so that if others want to speak, they have that opportunity. Please consider the fact that there may be young children watching the broadcast. It is our goal to maintain a respectful environment so that members of our community have an equal opportunity to address the board without interruption. The board welcomes your ideas and will consider them in deliberating an issue, but we may not respond to questions. I don't believe we have a sign-in sheet today, so please just come to the mic. Oh, okay. You grab that. Whoever was first on that list, if you know who you are, please come to the mic, as I'd like to try to go ahead and get started. Does anybody know who was first? Okay, thank you. Please state your name and your town.
Good morning, I'm Janet Bose. I'm from Holland, Pennsylvania. And I'm just here on behalf of the Achieve program. My daughter has joined that program this year in lieu of going to South for senior year. When we first went over to see the program, we were really impressed with the opportunities that were available to the children, the students there transitioning from high school out into the professional world and vocational world. Council Rock is known for best practices. It's one of the things that we've loved about this school district. We hope that you do your due diligence in finding appropriate locations for these young adults and give them the best opportunities to have authentic learning experiences so that they will be successful when they transition out into the adult and independent life. And I thank you for your time, and I do hope you really consider this program. And if you have not been out to see what wonderful things Mr. Engelhardt is doing with these young adults, you need to get out there and see it firsthand before you actually make a decision about their next few years. And I thank you.
Thank you very much. Tara Wigington, and then Loretta. So if you guys could line up just so we can keep it moving. I want to make sure I can give you as much time as possible.
Good morning, Tara Wigington of Ivyland. Again, back to talk about the relocation of LSAC. We had another meeting again with the parents this morning before this meeting, and again, we're just respectfully requesting that the board hear loud and clear our biggest concern. Please do not put our students back into a school setting. It is a transition program that has doubled in size in 1 year. That's how successful it's been. You know, Mrs. Brooks had said, you know, maybe we need to do some more research in the whole entire scheme of things with what the planning committee has done. I know they did a tremendous job, and I know a lot of time was dedicated to it. But when you look at the relocation of LSAC, all that occurred was a 5-minute tour in and out. They didn't get to see our students in action, what they stand for, what they've accomplished. I can tell you, this probably won't even have any effect on my son. He'll be gone in a year. But as a parent, I do not want to see this program fail. This program is nothing like any other district has. A lot of work and dedication has gone into this program. I will tell you, if it is put back into a school setting, the program will fail. You will not have parents sign on to this program. It is a step back for their children. You can't ask them to walk with their class and then put them back in a school setting. What parents will do is they'll turn to the IU again. And now the IU's in Neshaminy. And then you'll be busing students to Neshaminy, not Newtown, with a whole new set of transportation costs. Guess what I'm saying is that truly at the end of the day, is there any economic substance to this decision? I don't think so. We looked at the setting for my son way back the first year he was signing on in July. We were one of the last parents to sign on. He was going to the IU Office Skills program. And before we signed on, we insisted on seeing the location. And we did. And quite honestly, it hit me the other night driving home. The location at that time was being rented by Council Rock, but it was filled with supplies, equipment. So what the district is telling us now is that it was okay to pay $25, $30 a square foot to house supplies, but it's not okay to pay the same cost to educate our children. We proposed the Twining Ford location. Mr. Grupp had a fantastic suggestion of Chandler. I possibly renegotiate the lease. Please explore these options or seek an alternative location. Thank you.
Loretta, and after that is Angela. So go ahead. Thank you.
Good morning. My name's Loretta Devry. I live in Richboro. I'm here mainly to find out what what's the thinking on the closing of the Richboro Middle School, because my property directly abuts it, plus I border the emergency access out onto Bustleton Pike. So I'm very concerned about if it closes, what happens next. So I want to gain a lot more information, because it's very concerning to abutting property owners to figure out what you're going to do with it next. So I appreciate any input I can receive on that as this progresses.
We'll try.
Okay, thank you.
Angela. And after that would be Bernadette.
Good morning. My name is Angela Gonzalez Walker. I'm on the I'm the parent of Sarah Walker, who has been in Council Rock since she has been a child at elementary school. I know we know Mr. Klein very well. He was the principal of Sarah's first school. I'm here to represent the Achieve parents. Sarah now is a teenager. She's a 17-year-old transitioning out of high school. And I can't tell you how great this program will be for Sarah, because Sarah now has the opportunity to transition into the community, which we think is the main purpose of her education at Council Rock. And so I would like you to consider what has been proposed for you in terms of a location for Achieve. Achieve really should not be in a school setting because, again, the whole purpose of that program is to transition the students out of a school setting. And I think being in a school setting, it would be very distracting for that portion of their education being back in the community. So I will appreciate if you will consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Heenan. After that would be Jenny Schottmiller.
Approximately 2 years ago, I attended a meeting with a group of parents directly across the hall here. At that time, I was on the school board. My mission at that point was to talk to these parents and to discuss with them the opportunity to start a new program here at Council Rock. The program was called Achieve. These parents, I promised them that when these students started school, this was going to be the best program that they could imagine. I also promised them that the space was going to be an ideal setting. Doug, you both know firsthand, I went to that space. I made sure, with the help of an awful lot of people, the space was clean and welcoming for this population of students to come into this school district. 2 years later, I'm still volunteering my time with the Achieve program. Every single week, I'm out in the community trying to find job placements for these students. I am passionate about this program. I first became aware of these students probably 11 years ago when this program, the Multiple Disability Program at Newtown Elementary, previous superintendent was considering disbanding it. We need to consider this population. And my immediate recommendation to you is we need to include parents as part of this planning. It can't be they are there and you are here. We need to include this. I was also extremely disappointed with the recommendations. With regards to the recommendations, that the only thing that was truly mentioned was closing this facility, not where these students were going. So we immediately need to know, where are these students going? Thank you.
Jenny Schottmiller and then Amy McIntyre.
A week ago today, I sat down at my computer to see if I could wrap my head around Mr. Grupp's idea that I had heard at this meeting a couple days before. What I learned is that a good idea had been overlooked. You can save money, you can save a lot of money, even though you don't have enough decline in enrollment to close a school. I had a concern when I first came to the first school board meeting in July that the savings and the recommendations wouldn't be realized because the cost to build out more classrooms at existing schools and repurpose a closed school would far exceed the proposed savings. The plan I handed out today, which I will email to you later and will also be on our Facebook page, shows that you would have real savings in the bank while you are renovating your middle school, savings you can use. The reality is we don't have 700 student schools across the district at the elementary level. We don't need to argue about whether 90% or 100% capacity is the right level. We're between 90 and 100% capacity at the elementary level. Mr. Reinhardt showed a spreadsheet at one of the committee meetings that I saw that showed if we had everyone in one school, how efficient we could be at teacher and class size. If you create 5th and 6th grade centers, 1 in the north and 2 in the south, you get a lot closer to that ideal. If you redistrict the north in 2016, you could do it soon. You would spend very little money, and your savings would be large and immediate. If you redistrict the south, if you close Richboro Middle School, you could look at the enrollment at that time. Your savings would be immediate when you did that. Redistricting balances your student population at all of your schools. Creating 5th and 6th grade centers creates even greater efficiencies. You could probably get rid of most, if not all of your trailers if you do both redistricting and create 5th and 6th grade centers. Finally, I want to say I have learned so much through this process. You can look at the petition that we have, our Facebook page, the road signs, the car magnets, and you can see how much Wrightstown Elementary School means to our community. And although the school district doesn't owe us a school, I know from sitting at these meetings that means something to you as a board. I also hope by seeing what we're saying when we come to these meetings, that saving money, being an efficient and excellent school district also means something to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy and then Dan McCafferty.
I want to thank Jenny for doing this. It was so much work on her part, and it's pages and pages and pages of spreadsheets deep and tons of formulas, and it's accurate. She's checked it 10 times, and what she's kicking herself about right now is that the date. Okay. But like, it's just so, okay. It's like so silly, but you know, it's so thorough, and it is really so good. And I think that, you know, we're listening to you, and we hope that you're listening to us too, and we hear about utilization, and that we're not at the desired class sizes for our guidelines, and we've got trailers here, and, you know, 40% available capacity there, and, you know, and we've got a financial crisis with PSERS and this and that. So this truly addresses so much of that, and it keeps all of our schools open and educating our kids and supporting communities. And giving people a place to go that's close to home, and even busing efficiencies might be realized. So she's done a fantastic job, and I am so glad that I met her through this process and that we were able to work together. I do want to say too that I know full day kindergarten is something that the board would like to look at, and I think it's something that the community would really appreciate. But I want you to know that through Jenny's modeling, what she discovered is that it isn't viable right now with the enrollment that we have and the number of classrooms that we have available. So I would like to save you some time and suggest that you wait and see if enrollment declines in the coming years, which I don't think that it will. If it were to decline, instead of closing a school, you could now offer full-day kindergarten, and I think that would be a much more appreciated alternative. But I think it's moot because I don't think enrollment is going down. I want to point out something that has come to my awareness as I've met more and more people throughout the community. And we're currently aware of 3 families that had children in the district going to school. They sold their homes and bought new homes in the neighborhoods that funnel to Wrightstown Elementary School because there's a perceived admiration for that school. And it's probably going on more often than I realize. And so what I want you to know is that whether Wrightstown is an amazing school or a really, really good school, it's perceived to be fabulous. And if you close it, it is a perception that the quality of education offered by Council Rock goes down. And when that happens, property values go down, and when that happens, revenue goes down. And I know you're not really supposed to consider that, but I think that's what would happen too, and that's something that really hasn't been brought up much. Thanks a lot.
Okay, Dan McCafferty, and then Sandra.
I'm Dan McCaffrey, live in Pence Park for the last 35 years. My wife, my children, now my grandchildren go to Wrightstown Elementary, and it's just a fantastic little school. And not saying very much, but I really appreciate it if you consider what you're about to do is to close a great school and disappoint a lot of kids. And as far as class size going down, all the construction that's going on, the new houses that are going up, it has to grow. Thank you.
Thank you. Sandra McCafferty, if anybody would like to speak, we will keep public comment open if there are speakers until 9:30, and we will be ending at 9:30. But if you could line up along the side wall, we will try to listen to as many people as we can. Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Sandy McCaffrey from Pence Park. I am the first generation that started at Wrightstown Elementary School, and then my stepchildren, and now my 3 grandchildren. I like the small town feel of Wrightstown, and I think the children get a better education in the small one-on-one environment at this school, and they have done wonderful things at the school, and I would really like to see it stay open.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name's John McGowan. First time I've ever been here, but I've lived in the township for 40 years. Give you an example of what happens. My children all attended St. Bede's Villa of Holy Ghost. If I had it to do over again, I have 2 granddaughters that live with me permanently, and they're in Churchville Elementary. And if I had it to do over again, knowing what I know about how wonderful the Council Rock School District is, experiencing it firsthand, all my children have gone here. Another example, when St. Bede's lost a lot of their children and then they combined with Assumption, these things you have to consider, okay? A lot of people came in with kindergarten with my granddaughters. Only 1 went back to Catholic school after kindergarten. The rest stayed in Council Rock. Another example, in the year 1980s, St. Bede's had a lot of issues with leadership. They went from 955 students, because I used to work there and help out, down to 335 when they started. They lost that many students. They all came to Council Rock. What are you going to do if St. Bede's closes? Because now they were combined with Assumption. What are you going to do if Assumption or St. Andrews or any of the other private schools have an issue? You don't know what's going to happen, but they're going to come to Council Rock, and they're not going to leave because of the outstanding education they get. I would like to thank all of you because of the sacrifice you make, and Mr. Klein for the courageous decision you made. I think, I don't know what happened, but when you came with public and you said you weren't going to do anything for 2 years, I'm going to thank you for that because you're listening to the people, okay? The other thing was when I lived in Upper Moreland before I moved here, they closed all the neighborhood schools and put them in regional schools. It affected the home values, and like the lady just said, a couple of the ladies just said, it affects that feeling you have, okay? My children still go back to their elementary school in Upper Moreland before we moved into 40 years ago. And they still go there because it's something they still talk about. Now, about Churchville Elementary, this is what might happen in the future if you continue on the closing schools. My 2 granddaughters started out in kindergarten with an average, with 3 classes, and 17 or 18 children in a class, and that's 3. They're in 5th and 6th grade now. They have 4 classes, not 3. They have 29 and 30 in a class. Like the lady, one of the ladies said, well, you're between 90 and 100%. Well, like I said, when they were going to remodel the schools and they weren't going to air condition them, I sent an email to Mr. Klein. I said, I'll pay more money in taxes. How much is it going to cost to put air conditioning in Holland Elementary and Churchville? They can teach all day long, okay? They don't have to, take a half hour off or an hour off in the afternoon because it's too hot. And he listened. You listened, okay? Now, we went through the teacher meetings, and they have Common Core. You're putting more and more pressure on the parents. My daughter graduated as an education major. She spends at least an hour a night before Common Core doing homework with her children. What is going to happen now with Common Core, okay, when the teachers tell you they have to go from subject to subject, they're like a train schedule now. They can't wait for the children that don't get it. They have to keep going, okay? You have children that English is not their first main language coming into the school district. In one of the kindergarten classes, one of the little boys spoke maybe 5 words of English. How in the world are you going to give them the attention when you go from 3 classes to 4, you go from 17 to 30 or 29? They're not going to get it. The parents work to live here, okay? What are you going to do? They can't do it. Your scores are going to go down. I'll give you an example. My granddaughter Jessica was in Lancaster last weekend. Met 2 parents with children. The conversation went back and forth, and they said, what school do you go to? The council, this is Lancaster. The parents have children in Lancaster. They go, oh, we heard that is a great school district. It is. You're one of the best, okay? Nobody's paying me to come here and say this. This is from my heart. This is from my heart. I've lived here for 40 years. If I had to do over again, like I said, all my children, as well as my grandchildren who are doing it, would have gone to Council Rock, okay?
Sir?
The average scores, by the way, unfortunately, in Churchville, and I'm not going to say what they are, but they're not what they used to be. Is there any correlation between the sizes, the number of classes going up, and the size and number of students going up? The teachers can only do so much. And these children that need the special needs children, or the ones that come from foreign countries, they need a lot of attention. I don't see them increasing the size of the number of the people as much as
Sir?
they should to keep up with it.
I'm sorry, if you could wrap up, I just want to make sure if other people want to make comments, because we're very restricted on time today.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, it's the first time in 40 years, so I'm sorry.
That's okay. I was trying not to interrupt you, sir. I was trying to, but be respectful, but. I didn't mean you had to leave right then. I just wanted you to wrap up. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Okay. We're going to begin our agenda. Again, for those of you who may come in, just the conversation will go as long as it naturally goes, but we will be having a hard stop at 11:30, and at that point we will open it up for 30 more minutes of public comment, and we will be ending the meeting by noon. Okay. So at our meeting on Thursday night, we had some discussion about a lot of different topics, and in an effort to move the conversation forward, I took feedback, which I only got from a couple of you, and what I heard around the board table, and outlined something called items for discussion. And one of the things that was brought up is that perhaps we should discuss, we gave the planning committee a number of goals, perhaps we should open the conversation with that. What is our biggest priority? I just put some bullet downs. This is all just what I heard or what was sent to me on email yesterday. So I'm opening up the table for conversation. If you want to start there, if you have something else you want to say, have at it. This is board discussion. Who wants to start? Dr. Foster.
Yeah, so I just want to say, you know, when I ran for school board, one of the things I did is I benefited from all the information the district has on its website, and it was clear that the pension crisis was coming, and I'd actually walk around to houses with the list of what our pension payments were going to be, and it was clear that we were headed for some really rough times with like $2.5 million a year increases per year for a long period of time. And then when I got on the board, I learned about the capital needs from Mr. Taylor. And it was bad enough before, but then it became worse. And Mrs. Brooks mentioned that it's kind of a crisis, and it is. And I was kind of motivated because our children weren't in the district yet. And I wanted the district to be sustainable, and we all do, because it doesn't help our children if we have to close programming. So it's really that tension between sustainability and continuing education, and we're trying to navigate it, and I think we all see that. But when you get into the details, it can get so complicated so quick, and there's different ways to do it. The board can top down it and just say to the administration, look, you know, you're going to have to close this school, deal with it. But I just want to give you an example of why I am in favor of prioritization of redistricting versus closing schools. So I'm trying to fit within this framework for the meeting. You look at Holland, $18 million were spent, and we all agree we're running at 2/3 capacity in that school. So $18 million of renovations running at 2/3 capacity. That's weird. And when we go to raise taxes on our neighbors and ourselves, people that just doesn't fit into people's heads. How can you put money into a school and not run it at capacity? Same with Goodnow. We're pumping in $19.4 million, and right now there's 8 classrooms that are offline, and our children go there, and pretty much the school is operating okay. So there's 8 classrooms that are walled off. School's running okay. Maybe they need one more classroom but I don't think they need all 8. So what are we going to do with the 8? And then I just want to say one more thing, just a couple more seconds. Again, look at Sulphine-Stone versus Newtown Elementary. They have exactly the same population, exactly the same number of sections, but Newtown has 7 more rooms. So what's Newtown doing with the rooms? And this is where it gets to be sticky, because you have to start going into the capacity report from Schrader and looking at the programming. And the fact is, those 7 rooms, as described in the Schrader report, more services are happening at Newtown. So there's 1.5 more literacy specialists at Newtown listed. There's 1.5 rooms for that. There's 1 more math specialist room. There's a half a room for a psychologist. So it's the same school population, but they're getting different services. There's more services at Newtown. Special ed, there's a very serious special ed population there, multiple disabilities, but it's 3 children. There's 3.5 more rooms. There's a room for MDS district. There's a room for OT, which I assume is occupational therapy. So that's 2 rooms. And then there's a half a room for inclusion specialists. So there's 2.5 rooms for that. So do we want to get into the details of why these 2 very similar schools have very different allocations of resources, or do we just want to top down it and say, look, just tell us what the district would look like if we closed a school and lived within our means, or do we want to have that conversation, which is very difficult and time-consuming, about what's the programming, why is it there, why does one school get 1.5 more literacy specialists, et cetera. So anyway.
So you asked some good questions, and I neglected to start off by saying, in order to make this process continue to move forward, what I thought our takeaways from today, along with what you're saying, is you're asking, how much do we want to do and what do we want to do, was Doug was going to keep a list of questions we have. So on Thursday night, we asked the administration to redistrict if we closed Wrightstown and show us what that would look like, and then redistrict if we took all the trailers offline. If they were forced and they said tomorrow, all the trailers burned to the ground, where would you put kids? So they have those 2 things. So Doug's gonna try to track, and we're gonna try to questions that we want answers, because we want those details to make decisions.
That's right.
By the same token,
and so I'm just saying this because when we look at the capacity report, and the public is saying where there's not enough room, it's 90% of what? And so at one of these schools, the programming is using 3 more rooms for literacy specialists, et cetera. So how do we get at that? Because when we just...
Do you want to ask that question for an answer is where I'm going, because the 2 things we were going to take away from today were, maybe there are some topics that we clearly want a motion for. Maybe. I'm not saying we do. Not we all, but there's enough agreement that we want to vote on November 6th on whether to build a new Newtown Middle or whether to renovate. Maybe we can decide that day, maybe we can't. There will also be questions that we want answers to before we would make a motion.
So I guess the question I would have is, in addition, I agree with the points.
That's what I'm trying to get to.
Right. So that the only new thing to that is what is because if you look through the capacity report, there's different categories of rooms for special education and for small group special services, and different schools actually use different names for these categories. The categories don't match up across the schools. So what is the administration's vision of what an elementary school is? Minus district special ed, like just your average elementary school, what do we want to provide the children across the schools? Because clearly Newtown is getting more of some stuff than Sulphine-Stone. So it seems like there's a difference.
Maybe Mr. Klein can address that question right now.
But in general.
No, you'll take it. Okay, so
I just without looking at it, I don't believe that's the case. I think they have the same number of literacy specialists. I just think Sulphine-Stone puts them in 1 room, and Newtown has the ability to put them in 2. So it isn't about an allocation.
Yeah,
but I've scripted
that's
this,
it.
I'll get back.
So that's a question we'll get an
Yeah, how
answer
much
to.
space do we need to run our program in an elementary school? So that's the thing.
Others?
For me, you know, I look at this and I see a couple competing things going on. We have an issue here about should we close a school, you know, or multiple schools, and at the same time, I'm just taking two components. We have trailers. The two seem to be at odds. That if you're closing schools and you still have trailers, those two, just viewed in isolation, seem to be incompatible. And so for me, I think the exercise of looking first at what it would take to get rid of the trailers. And my goal for getting rid of the trailers is really, it's not that they're an ongoing expense. They're not the most appropriate place for education. That's the goal from that perspective. You know, could you save money? Yeah, you could close schools and still have trailers, but that's kind of odd. That's like living in a tent because you don't want to fix your house. Go ahead. You were going to say something. I couldn't.
I know, I'm trying not to interrupt. I'm trying to be respectful. Trailers cost money too, and
They
the
do.
renovate, and we have a lot of toys that need costs.
But it's
Especially
still
when they
like
get
living.
moldy.
It's still like living in a tent while you have a house,
Yes,
and that
yes.
to me is odd. So, fun occasionally, but not all time. So first thing, let's figure out getting rid of the trailers. To me, the components for that, the first component to that, is not you get rid of the trailers and then figure out where you put kids. I think the first component of that is going to be the optimization of the use of the schools, which speaks to how do we get people into the buildings they need to be. Part of it is what Bill is saying, which is where's the space. Part of it is breaking free of the, and this is, I keep harping back at, Jenny did this work, I think it merits a serious consideration. Mine was a think piece, hers was more detailed. It merits serious consideration because I think one of the things we have to do is look at some of the things that we have now that we're willing to break away from and free ourselves of. I think that we need to be able to free ourselves of the school configurations we have now. That is a K to 6, that is a 7 and 8, and that is a 9 through 12. I think we have to be able to break free of that. Once we say that concept, we're willing to give that concept up, we're allowed to do certain other things that we may not have done. And I don't know that the planning committees knew that they had that freedom to break free of some of those inherent concepts. So first for me, trying to make it shorter than my normal long dissertations. Let's get rid of the trailers. Get rid of the trailers by optimizing the use of the buildings we have now. For me, when we look at the topics here, that's my number one priority. Savings immediate versus savings long term. You know, it's a portfolio. Sometimes you have to spend some money to save some money. It's an unfortunate thing. But I like recurring savings. You know, we talk all the time when we sit here and we talk about and saying things like, you know, well, we don't want to use, and you know, Wendy and I go back and forth, I think we all go back and forth on different sides on this thing. You know, I don't want to use the fund balance to pay down taxes this year because that's a one-time money, but it's a recurring cost. Same thing here. I think we have to look at what's going to give us returning revenues or decreases in revenues. Truthfully, when I looked at the numbers, they're not all in, but you know, the Wrightstown, I was disappointed not in the work, but in the small size that you get for closing a school. You really, the children don't disappear, the staff doesn't disappear. I've mentioned it before, I'm not interested in selling buildings because to rebuild buildings and reopen buildings, it's a nightmare. If they're offline, you no longer have them. So that savings was less than $1 million one time. That's not worth it to me. And lastly, on the 5-year plans, 5-year plans versus shorter or long term. Again, it's a portfolio. I think we need to, I think for me, the Newtown Middle, given what we know now, the Newtown Middle and Holland Middle renovations, I think they have to keep going forward. I think it just makes sense because we'll need the buildings. As for what do we do in the future, you know, there are two schools of thought. One is our population going to go down? I said it before, I'll say it again. We had a great bump, a great bolus, which got us the trailers. I think we're coming down to a steady state. It's going to be lower. There'll be some fluctuation. We have to be prepared to take that. The observation about the Catholic schools potentially closing or maybe not closing, that's an interesting thing. I hadn't thought about it. So I think by keeping it on redistricting, but redistricting for optimization, But recognizing that even as we do that, the flexibility between schools and groupings of schools, we have to be willing to do that again on an interim basis as it happens. Sometimes we get very comfortable in what we've got, and we just stay with it a long time, sometimes past its useful life. And that's what I think we are now. I think we're past our useful life on some of our configurations. Number one is trailers offline, optimize the buildings.
So, do you want to go?
I agree completely.
Me too.
I'm in complete agreement with what Mr. Grubb just said. So for me, when you put redistricting versus closing schools, it's not a versus. Each of those things is a ball that's in the air, that's in play, that we have to talk about and fit together.
I didn't mean choosing one, just, you know, it's
You
meant
can't,
prioritizing.
you can't.
What do you want to do
for me,
first?
First, I have to be confident and feel that the numbers that we're using and the way we're using our buildings, the way we use our space, is something I can recognize as correct. So when we say capacity for a building is 90% less than X number, and we know that that X number was higher when the building was used by my children, and we're down, I don't accept that capacity number. And so it's those numbers, it's in there that I feel not secure that we're making a right or a wrong decision. I need to feel secure about that somehow. I don't think closing a school is one-time money. All right, so you save $1 million closing it, but you save it every year after that too. And I don't think you'll have the same number of teachers. When I look at class sizes, and you know, we asked for it yesterday. This is Rolling Hills, okay? This is where my kids went to school, and where their kindergarten has 24 and 22. First grade 21, 24, 24. Second grade 18, 18, 18. Up at grade 6, it's 31 and 32. 2 classes. You know, had it hit another number, they probably would have broken it, and you would have been down really low. And I know that in those pods, we had 6 classes. We're now down to 4, but it's so, the building itself is so underutilized compared to the past. And so if you say what today is, and you can only use the building the way it's being used today, and you keep these numbers as low as they are, I don't think you're getting the kinds of savings you need. Why would I care about these savings? Actually, for me, I live in Northampton. My house was built in 1963. My taxes are great. When I compare my taxes to the taxes that either of my children pay, we're home clear. My taxes were cheaper than my mother's in Philadelphia. She owned a twin house with 2 little lots. I paid less money in taxes. It's not about that. We have a responsibility to the total community to run this school as efficiently and as correctly as we can. My original choice, if you talked to me about it 2 years ago, was never, ever to close Wrightstown. Never. Because it is the only school in that community. The school I offered up years ago was Rolling Hills. Rolling Hills because we have so many schools in Northampton. It just made common sense to me. Then we did this facility study, and we studied for a whole year last year. People came, they worked. And as a result of that, it leaned just much more to Wrightstown as a immediate savings. An immediate savings that would cascade into a necessity to redistrict. And that redistricting would help to right-size the classes, take care of situations like Holland being underutilized, and would maybe spread it so you don't have some schools that have larger classes and other schools that have little classes. It made sense to me as a package. But the questions that surround, we have a community out there working like mad now. They're figuring out numbers. These are people that have no educational background, know nothing about the rules and laws that we live under, and yet are trying their best to make our job for us. We need leadership from this district. We need leadership to tell us what's necessary to right-size this district. We cannot wait 5 years or 4 years to do this. We owe it to the people in this community to act sooner than that. So for me, I think that we need to begin next year, but I don't see a will on the board to do that. And so, would we begin the following year? Or is it the intention of this board then to talk more about full-day kindergarten? Are we trying to save space in these buildings to bring in full-day kindergarten? I'm only one vote, so I don't know about that.
I just had a question. When you say begin next year, you mean begin this work or begin closing?
Do something. Do something. Closing, redistricting. I'm good with removing trailers, but all trailers from every school, and leave no children outside for any reason. Not we redistrict and only touch certain schools. That's not acceptable to me. I've said it all along. This process is not about Wrightstown or Rolling Hills. It is about every school in the district. Because as I look at the numbers and the way we use our buildings, it's wrong across the board. We got to do better. So I want a shorter plan. I want us to look for some immediate savings because the pension is like a railroad train that's going to hit you. And throw in there, and it's not in here, the fact that we are going to renegotiate 2 new contracts. And when I look at what happened at Central Bucks, they're going to be paying teachers at the end of their contract $120,000 a year. They're going to pay 25% of salary for pension. How are we going to do that? I want somebody to explain to me how we're going to do that within the constraints of Act 1, because that's what our teachers are going to fight for. That's how it's always been. You know, one moves here and the other moves a little here and the next one moves a little there. But we have this cap, and expenses will rise, and education happens in the gap. The money to educate happens in the gap. So, LSAC. LSAC concerns a lot of people, and it concerns me. What are we going to do with that? So it's $600 and some thousand a year to rent the space. 10 years ago, when we saw that space, those of us that went to it, having seen what LSAC was, with the Sloan School, where we had been housing them, what we had been doing with those kids, we saw that space and said, wow, look at this. It had room for the knock, it had room for the kids to actually have a cafeteria, something they never had before. It had rooms for them to have classrooms and offices for counseling and places for group meetings for those some of them fragile children. And more recently, we moved Achieve into that setting. On my list of things, you know, we got to get out of that lease. But that doesn't mean we can throw those programs on the streets. And so I won't vote to do that until we can find an appropriate setting for both of those programs. And I want to hear from administration where we're going to put those children and what we're going to do with them and how that's going to work out for them before we can close that lease.
So we're right in that for a question. I don't want to stop you. I know you have other things to say. I just want to make note of that.
So everything Mr. Ruff said, I can go down that road with you. On the idea of redoing Newtown Junior High and renovating Holland and what is going to happen to Richboro, I don't know in the future. I mean, I can't vote on we're closing Richboro or we're not closing Richboro. I know that we have facilities that need space. So Newtown Junior High, they talked to us about renovating it. Renovating it will be just shortly less expensive than redoing it. I think if the ground allows us to build, if we have clear ground to build on, I would prefer to see us rebuild than renovate. Holland can be renovated to take in more children. If that happens, then we would be able to redistrict that level of kids and go and close Richboro. Now, we have these like loose facilities. We have Twining. If you go behind Council Rock South and you walk the little trail behind it, you're going to find all kinds of lawn cutting, snow removal, tractors, all kinds of, just sitting out there in the elements. At LSAC, we used half a building for holding old stuff. For a while, we rented that car dealership and stuck our old stuff in it. We have a lot of old stuff. The state doesn't let you get rid of old stuff easily, but we need to not spend facilities money holding old stuff. Not in trailers. Trailers need to be knocked down. Whatever it costs, we need to get rid of them. Somebody has to go through that. So you said, Mr. Grupp, we need to spend a little money sometimes to save a little money. Twining might be ideal for the nursing home next door. I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Maybe it's a saleable property. It's in really nice shape right now. Each of those buildings functions. Whereas 10 years ago, when Mrs. Heenan and I came on the board, it was not in real good shape. We actually went and carried on and complained, and the neighbors complained, and it was terrible. But it's much better now. We need, and this is something we don't talk about yet, but we need a place to put the stuff so it doesn't get all rusted and worn out. The facilities department could stand at least one great big pole barn at south rather, and they could probably stand one great big pole barn at north, just to put everything. If we did that, and if we had extra room in a wing of the high school or some other place, maybe the knock could go there. Maybe the offices from Twining could go to a wing of the high school. Or maybe they could be in other places. The idea of using Chancellor as a home for Achieve someday, maybe that's a perfectly good idea. It's in walking distance of a lot of businesses. Maybe Achieve could go to a new building in, well, Twining, if you look at Twining, I would suggest, Twining has been suggested. On a higher order of good places to put those children, I don't know that that's the best we can do for them. So I'm not going to look for where they can go as just a place. I want to look for the highest order of where we can place those children that will benefit them. We have all of these balls in the air. And there has to be some do to it. And the do to it that can be done, I really think, is closing trailers and doing a first level of redistricting. And 5 years from now, or 4 years from now, we might have to do that level of redistricting one more time. And then maybe we can go, but it shouldn't be every 12 years that we redistrict. We need to right-size this district. We have a lot of different facilities needs.
Somebody else? Are you done, Ms.
I'm
Sexton?
done.
Yeah, so I agree largely with what's been said before, so I try not to repeat it. But what I really like about the redistricting piece, first focused on taking the trailers off, is by redistricting and taking a look at how we use our space and using it most efficiently, we'll start to point to school consolidation justification where it's needed. It'll really help you see if once we've done the redistricting and taken the trailers off and get to a real 90% capacity of these buildings, are we still underpopulated? Do we have an opportunity to consolidate school? So I like that approach first. And to Patty's question, I think we have to move on that next year. I think we have to move on that quickly. I also believe that we can find opportunities to consolidate LSAC and Twining. I think we can't do it without respecting what we're trying to make happen with the Achieve program. So I'd look for...
And Sloan, don't forget
Yeah,
Sloan's
and
kids.
Sloan.
Right.
So I'd look for the administration's recommendations as to how we can do that. I'm in support of moving forward with the middle schools. I think the opportunity to build new in Newtown is the right one. A function of that, needs to be the redistricting piece. And then the question about Richboro, and actually Wendy mentioned it this morning, is, what do we do with that building if we close it? Could we use it for other things? Could we repurpose it versus sell? So that might be an interesting opportunity. The other thing that we haven't really talked about within all of this is as we do these things, we've got other capital improvements that are going to be required at the other buildings that we're really not talking about. So for me, as we move forward with potential consolidation of, LSAC, Twining Ford, as we redistrict, as we remove trailers, as we look at this middle school project, what I would need to make a decision to move forward in those areas, and I'm inclined to say that's where I would think it was going, is, what's that look like over a 5-year period? And I'd want to see, hey, what's the number of trailers today over that 5 years, and see that go down to 0 and see it done relatively quickly. What are the number of teachers that we have in place based on how we use these buildings, because that's where a lot of our expense is. What's the size of the administration look like within those buildings if we go to more kids? Do we need more? Could that be an ongoing cost? And then look at what our revenues are anticipating to be over time. Will the IT continue to go up?
What is that, do you know?
Typically under staff downstairs, so I'm not quite sure.
Bob,
Bob, would you take the run downstairs and just ask now?
Can you just confirm that we're still being recorded?
Ah.
It was Bob. Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know if you could have heard or...
We don't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
And then the last piece of that is, what do our appropriations, how the costs change over the 5 years? What's that mean for potential taxes? So the way they're just running on capital plan requirements. These are all other elements that I'd like to see with that, so we can truly look at what a financial picture looks like against the actions that we're looking to take over. The most important part for me about this whole school consolidation issue, elementary specifically, consolidation question, gets answered in my mind very quickly by the redistricting piece and looking at true usage of our schools. To me, it will become quite clear if we're able to get that piece right. So that's where I'm at.
Other comments?
So I just want to add 2 more things. In looking at the facilities thing, let me see if I have this right. Richboro has a loading dock. Rolling Hills does not have a loading dock. I don't think Wrightstown has they don't have a loading dock, do they? No loading dock.
Most of the elementary schools do not.
So when we think about repurposing these buildings for maybe moving out of Twining or out of some other places and into a school building, they sort of need to have a loading dock, because they take in a lot of things for supplies and resources. So this is a long-range problem. In the short range, we're absolutely right to get rid of trailers and do it as fast as we can.
Other board members want to speak? Mr. Bialik?
Yeah, I keep going back to common goals and interests, and what I hear from everyone, I think everyone who at least has spoken today wants to get rid of trailers. And I think that's common among all of us. And then maximum efficiency of the facilities and continuity of programs within the schools, and And I hear that a lot, but I do also want to focus on the community piece of it. And it's one of our charges to the planning committee, and it feels like it's gotten lost. We have a lot of activity from Wrightstown, and I think that's great. There's a lot of discussion about that being the only school in the community there, and I think that's very, very important, and I don't think we want to dismiss that at all. And I do want to focus on also Achieve and Sloan. Patty and I had a good conversation this morning about the relocation of that property. And I'd like some information from Mr. Taylor about how much square footage we're really using in LSAC. When I went through, I think it's 29,000 square feet or 26,000 square feet, the total building is. But I'd like to look at how we can repurpose the space we're using, not repurpose, reallocate the space we're using for storage and then for education programs with Sloan and Achieve. Because it may be, I'm looking at some properties for sale or lease in Newtown and Richboro. There may be some other really great properties where we could put the Achieve program, maybe the Sloan program, where they can run a viable business out of it. Whatever creative idea the program director may come up with there. Newtown Middle School, there's a lot of discussion about the $8 million difference between the renovation and the cost of new. And I think that's a little clouded because we had 4 different options, and I'd like to see those options put on the website, Doug, when I can't remember who the architect was. Who gave us the 4 different options? Was it Dewey? Was it Dewey who gave us the 4 different? I'd like to see that on the website because there's much greater than $8 million difference. Option 1 to option 4. Option 4 was build new. Option 1 was renovate minimally. But we're talking about efficiencies of the schools, and I think everyone knows that I'm not there building a new school at Newtown Middle School, and certainly not for $54 million, because I feel like we've given the construction team a blank check that said just build a school. If we're going to move forward and build a new school, I'd like to at least give them a budget and say, let's see if we can do it for $35 million. Let's see if we can do it for $40 million. Doug had sent around, at my request, a list of some of the schools that same architect had done in the past. I think we went back 4 years, 5 years, and there was a great price difference. I didn't break it down per square foot, but I'd like to see that. So I certainly don't want us to be the most expensive school in the tri-state area. And then the financial model. We've looked at a few different financial models that Bob's put together, and one of them showed the cost of pensions, right? What that's going to cost. Separately, we looked at the cost of building a new school and the capital costs all together. I'd like to overlay those together and see those really frightening numbers together, right? Because I think that's important. Because I don't think that we've seen those both yet together. Have we seen it together?
Yeah, emerged.
We can bring it back out.
The most recent projections that I prepared, I did not put together, but when we talked about, I think we talked about 200 million or 100 million and how we put that together. The most recent projections I didn't, and I could easily do that, but I did way back show.
I remember that.
Yeah.
Right.
But recently, I could redo all of that work, and I'd be fine with doing that if you want that.
That'd be great.
I think it's important to see the total impact of those numbers together, rather than just saying, okay, well, this is what the tax increase will be over 7 years, because if we build this property and if we do this, because it's going to be much, much greater with piecers in place.
Could I just riff off of you for a second? So Newtown Middle School, we don't know how big that should be. If we go to a 6 through 8, that's a completely different thing. So I haven't seen a recommendation from the administration as to how big is it. So I don't even know exactly for sure.
I agree.
And just to I never in 100 years wanted a school that looked like the one we got from Schrader. I don't want a Taj Mahal. I don't want a building that has no cafeteria and children walking around and sitting in chairs and eating their lunch.
That was just a concept.
It was a concept. It's a concept. I don't want a building like that. I actually asked for it.
But to your point, Patty, if they can build that for $54 million, what can they do if we give a
so
box? Right?
I'm looking for something that runs along with the lines of St. Andrews. And actually, a road trip to Centennial. Just saying.
Look, I think that we really went at that, and I'm not being critical here, I'm just saying us as a group. I think we went into that backwards. We said,
Build us a school.
build us a school, period. We didn't say, build us a school for $35 million.
That's not really quite true.
Build us a school for,
Before
okay.
we got those, I sat at that meeting and I was shown a rectangular building that had a hallway and looked real functional, utilitarian. Doesn't have to be ugly, just has to be useful. I don't know, millions of people have been educated in utilitarian buildings and done all right, and are still doing okay. So,
Well, I like Sherry's proposal, and I like the idea that that group thought out of the box, and that's the kind of thinking we need. Again, if we don't like the use, Patty's eyes just went wide at me, but if we don't like the use, that's great, but I like the idea that they were thinking differently. And again, if they can do that for $54 million, what can they, build us a square box, and maybe that only costs us 35, and as long as it's.
Can I ask you a
it looks-
question?
Yes.
Can I ask you a question? So I agree that if we're going to do something at Newtown Middle, we need to decide. I think as part of this, maybe is it going to be 6 to 8? Is it going to be 7, 9? That would be part of kind of this planning. But I think we could get agreement to say we want to do something, either renovate or do new at Newtown Middle as part of our 5-year plan. Could be a motion we could have, we could say, I don't know how everyone else feels, so I'm just putting it out there as food for thought. As I was trying to think of, what are we gonna vote on November 6th? Like, what's doable? I mean, some of this, we need more research. I think you've spoken to that, Mr. Bilek. We need more time, we need more thought. But are we committed to doing something? Either doing a renovation or doing new? And do we have enough board support for that? And could we simply say that's one of our motions? But I think if we do that without deciding with the grade configuration, then that's too loose for me. I don't know. Just for me, the line becomes, are we going to keep it 7 to 9? And yes, we're going to do something at Newtown Middle, and we're starting it this year. If it takes 4 years or 3 years or whatever, that's what it takes. I can't do too much about that. But this year, I'm committed to making a decision about either renovate or new. I don't know if we have to make, for me, in the next month, a decision of one of those. I just want to be committed to doing something.
I agree.
And then after November, we can decide new or renovate and look at different plans, maybe that kind of thing, because that's going to take some more time. But I want to tell the public that I'm committed to doing something. And that's where I am on the middle school topic.
We are going to do something. Not that we're committed to doing it, but that we're doing it, and at a date certain, we're doing it.
Well, that's okay with me too, but what I'm saying is, it feels a little loose. I'd prefer if we said, oh, we're gonna have a new one, or we're gonna renovate, we'd have that decision. But I feel like there's too many questions and too many answers, and then what, we don't have a motion at all? And then we end up nowhere. So I'm struggling with bringing this to decision point, you know what I mean? Like, what are we saying we're willing to do? I'm much more leaning to new than renovating. From what I've seen so far, I'm not saying that the building I saw was perfect and that we couldn't tweak it. I think a lot more work needs to be done. But what I'm committed to doing is, I'd like to have those meetings and make a decision by, I don't know, January, February, so they could start doing things. You know, it's gonna take 4 years. I'm committed to doing that post this kind of bigger picture discussion.
Let's let Mark finish his
No,
comment.
that's okay.
because
I had a follow-up to Wendy.
My question to you was, are you okay with, I'm committed to doing something at Newtown Middle, and we have to decide between these two pictures? Or
Absolutely. I just want all the information out there, easily accessible on the website, as far as what our options really were or are with Newtown Middle as they were presented. Because I couldn't find it on the website, let's put it that way, in the area, the capital planning area. And on listserv, or not listserv, board docs, forget about it. There's no way I can find it. So I just, because there's a lot of, it just becomes a reality when someone says $8 million difference, $8 million difference, and then it sounds like a no-brainer to go, okay, pay the extra $8 million for new, but there were 3 other options there, 2 other options there that I think everyone should look at, or be able to look at. And if we go to 2 middle schools, that changes everything. There's no doubt about that. Yes, I think something needs to be done at Newtown Middle. I don't want to overpay for it. I don't want to be the most expensive school that our architect and construction team has ever done. I do not want that. I want the best value for every square foot that we have, that we build or renovate in that school.
Yeah, can I just clarify? We're talking about what was presented. First of all, what they presented was based upon a preliminary program that I sat down with the principal of the school, and we prepared an actual preliminary program to determine what the needs of the school would be if it were new. We then took that program to develop a budget to determine a ballpark budget on what the project would cost if it were new, or to fit that new program into the renovated building. So then it tells us what kind of additions we would need based on a ballpark square foot cost versus current square foot cost, and estimated site cost, and contingencies and other things. So certainly the goal of this team, myself included leading the charge, would always to be to have the most cost-effective project that we could. You know, functional, certainly, but not the most expensive school in Pennsylvania or anywhere. I mean, I'm looking for, you know, the most value for our dollar. So
Right.
that is the charge, and that would be respected. As far as the plans that were presented, they were presented based upon a schematic program and just how they think. So none of those buildings are our building. They showed us how they think. This is what the building could look like based on a program that you provided to us in an RFP, based on a budget you provided, and based on a schedule you provided. So when we ultimately do start this project, we will sit back down with all of the end users, whoever that's determined to be by Tim Long and the crew over at Newtown. We will sit down, we will collect all of the relevant information, develop a more accurate, more detailed program, take another look at the budget. We will also have our constraints, what things we want, what things we don't want. Patty's request, we don't want a Taj Mahal, we want a functional, utilitarian type building. We'll put some money into some finishes, maybe at an entrance, but the rest of the building can be utilitarian. I mean, we don't want a cinder block building at the same time, but we do want something that is going to fit into the community. But we will respect the budget, we will respect your charge. So I just want to be clear that what we saw was not our project, even by Schrader. They were just trying to show us how they think, and they were way outside the box, 21st century learning. That's what that was about. So
The purpose of that was just to be able to pick an architect. So
Correct.
it was about thinking. So I'm fine to a certain extent putting on the web, but we just need to remember, it wasn't really what our end project, it was just to decide among architects.
That's not what I'm talking about either, put it on there. I'm talking about the 4 different
And I
options
got
for-
you. So the 4 concepts exactly are to take the building as it lives and just take all of the things
Okay, I
identified
see.
in the capital plan that I prepare. And if you were to take that and implement those improvements, what the cost would be, what you would get as an end result, and what you wouldn't get. And then there's a price to take it, renovate it, and put on some minimal additions to facilitate the program. Then there's kind of taking off the gym and putting on a large addition to give you a better suited program in the facility. Then the option to just build a new on the same property and demolish the old upon the completion. So all of those options are on there. The advantages and disadvantages to each are listed in there, and we can get that posted. I'll talk to Mark and we'll...
I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
I just forwarded to board members that was the February 27th board meeting. It's on the web, it's on our board doc space. I just forwarded to all board members. That's the one, what is it? I think Mark is asking about, was the one where we got the
That's it,
various
yep.
plans. So I just forwarded, it is not easy to find, you have to know where it is. It's not easy to find. I just forwarded that to all board members. If you want to, you can distribute that to whomever you want, but it's in
It'll be on
board
the
docs.
website soon, right? So it's okay. So thank you.
Could I ask a question? Doug, what would the unintended consequences or the financial impact of waiting 6 months? I mean,
Yeah, so that's a good question. It's actually on my mind. As we're sitting here talking about saving money and the best way to look after, the tax dollars. I mean, one of the concerns that I would have is, as this project is being considered, if we wait and we don't make a decision into this winter, and this pushes into the spring of next year, and this whole project would then kind of slide another year, there's generally, and I'm going to say generally, and I know right now it's about a 4% inflationary cost on a project like this. And I'm not telling you that this needs to drive your decision. I'm just giving you information. So what I would say is by making that decision later rather than sooner on the potential of the 2 middle school projects, you're looking at roughly $4 million worth of real dollars
that we would spend in addition to what we're looking at to delay this another year. So those are things to consider as we make our decisions. I mean, those are real dollars. That's based on the economy today. You know, if things start to pick up a little bit and contractors get more competition and better projects start coming out, then they start to be more selective with bidding. Certainly a new middle school, people will jump all over to bid. A more messy renovation project, not all contractors are interested in diving into those kind of projects.
Where's the red zone start in terms of when we're looking at?
I actually think you're right on task with the November decision, truly.
For
So you would want to know new, or you're saying we need to decide new or renovation by November?
Based on where we are with the process right now, I think a November, December at the latest decision would be most appropriate in order to keep that project moving with a summer of 16 start, right?
Okay, Mr. Greff?
A couple things are going on. When you talk about what are we going to decide November 6th, I hear Doug's commentary around that. That's fine. I think there's we have to compartmentalize what's going on. November 6th, the motions we make, if we want to do something, have to be something we can affect. And they can't be ethereal, they can't be conceptual at that point. What I think this board needs to do is between now and November 6th is settle out enough to tell the administration a little bit, you know, Bill started off with, you know, we have to, paraphrasing terribly, is, you know, we have to give direction. We can't just keep, you know, we have to either manage it to a, you know, this is what we want in this building, or give them the direction to do something that they then do what we want in each building. We can't play the game of being both. So for me, what has to happen before November 6th is we need to give the board, the administration direction, clear direction, that says, take the trailers off, get them as low as you can, let's be candid about that, using the tools of optimizing the use of the school. So I'll go back to that. That's the direction we have to give them before November 6th, so they come to us with a plan on November 6th that says, this is how we will achieve it. Okay, because, let me get through, everybody write your notes down. I was being real careful writing notes down about what I want to comment on, whatever I said, trying to not to interrupt. So that's what we need to do for that part. There's this, and I think that we need to compartmentalize and understand there is an elementary school component that we need to address. We need to compartmentalize that, make that happen. There's the middle school component that we need to address. I don't know that these two are strongly linked, but you know, I think the elementary school, to Patty's question earlier, see, I was writing notes rather than, to the question, when? I think the redistricting is 2015, 2016. I think that idea of getting children optimized into those buildings, giving them the administration the direction to optimize the placement, throwing off the burden or the chains of what our current configuration is, that's something we go for 2015. It's not a construction project, it's a redistribution of people, it's understanding the transportation. That's 2015 because we need the savings now, sooner, because everything else we want to do, I want the savings as far forward as I can. Twining Ford, for me, not for kids. It's not that it's a bad place, but it's not for children. I don't think it's appropriately situated. We talked about trailers. These are all low individualized buildings where movement between them, I don't know if there's a cafeteria there. It's a not for kids building. On the other hand, we had administration functions there. I don't mind putting them back, some of the administrative functions back there. Chancellor Street for Achieve, I said it last time, I'm all for it. Mark's issue regarding the 55 million, you know, that was my comment. What they gave us that for 55, I think Patty said it too. 55, that's what they designed, what could they give us for 30? I did ask that, and I went to Doug with that question, and Doug's commentary was, that wasn't a $55 million project they showed us. That was a concept piece, you know, that this is what you can do, and then you rein back by reality. I like Schrader. I'll go with Breslin. I agree with Patty's concept of it's a box. In going through my notes, I was coming upon renovation projects, Doug, we had for some school in like Allentown that was presented to us at some point, which was what they paid for renovation of a in-school. Do you recall this? I don't know why. Okay, I'll show this to you later. I don't know why I had it, but it was their renovation costs. But they were renovating a building which hadn't had a lot of renovations. Our problem with Newtown Middle School is it's spread out and it's a bunch of disconnected buildings which are connected, and to repurpose them is almost impossible. So I talked about direction for the administration. For me, go back to that, solving the elementary school, compartmentalization. Elementary, I talked about that. That I think is compartmentalized. Middle school, I think that's something we can compartmentalize. Closing Richboro at some point in the future, agreed. And I think that's why some of the things that we do for the interim, we all talk about getting out of LSAC. I don't disagree. However, if I'm going to repurpose Richboro Middle School, we could put some of the functions back in the Richboro Middle School when they come out of LSAC. I'm not sure what to do with that. Lastly, the high schools. I don't look at a lot of redistricting going on around the high schools. I don't look at that. But I think that there's that concept of what's going on at North and what else can we place in North. I'm not eager to put elementary school kids in North. I don't think it's situated for that. There were functions of the NOC. We had talked about that before. We had talked about that we bought the NOC. We bought into the NOC because we thought we needed server rooms. Technology changed. We don't need the server space we did. Let's put it back at North. And I don't mind moving parts of administration back to North. Some of our, as I look at this building, I think what functions could go to a high school environment and still function effectively? Right off the bat, all the offices, and there are quite a few in this building, dedicated to special services. They don't, when they see people, they see them in the conference room. Those people in our special services, would be special education people, Chuck Lambert's group. To me, perfect. Put them in North, put them in North because they're working in the office. They need to see people. There's some things there. They don't have to have a lot of interaction with kids. Not that they're bad with kids, but they don't need it. It's neutral. Put them in North. I've got a whole bunch of space here. You want to talk about putting Achieve in a place which is set up to be an office environment? It's great space upstairs. So I think these are the things we have to think about, but to compartmentalize them. We can do a bunch of these things simultaneously. Moving, I look for Chuck, he's not here, so he can't yell at me. Moving Chuck's group next year, to me, it's not a major to do if the space, the problem at North is, if there's space available, it's not all aggregated. So there's some component there that we would have to give North direction now to plan of how would you repurpose, get the free space aggregated to be an office space. It doesn't need to be aggregated in the same way that it would be if I were putting an elementary school there, because if I was putting an elementary school, I'd need physical partitions to protect, not to protect, but to differentiate elementary from high school. Just because I don't want those groups merging. But the administration, they can go into a space with much less renovation. I'll try to keep my
I would
mouth
like to let
short.
some people who haven't spoken yet. Go ahead.
To the urgency or necessity to move forward with the junior high, Rob has also spoken to us about interest rates. His whole scheme, I don't mean to call it a scheme.
Yeah.
His whole plan.
His whole Ponzi scheme.
It's not a scheme. His whole plan. His whole plan is dependent. His plan is dependent on the interest rates as they run now. If we wait another year, I don't know. And it doesn't look good in that direction. The other thing, when I hear Mr. Block or Mr. Grupp talk about taking off trailers incrementally, nah. For me, they all go.
I'd say incremental.
All right, like you want to get them down as low as you can. I want them to zero. I don't want any children outside. If we have to keep them to hold the junk because we can't get rid of the junk, and we can allow them to get moldy if it has to, but I don't think we should be running heat and air conditioning and electricity out to those trailers anymore. I don't want it. And if they cost you were doing a great job selling them to the police department. I think that's wonderful. If we're selling our trailers to those folks out there, should I have said that? I think
It's a little late now.
Let them come and take
prison
them.
system
Offer them
is-
some more. I mean, I don't know.
So I want to just clarify, because I'm the one that said, do we vote now, do we vote later, and push on. I'm personally very close to being able to vote on a new Newtown Middle. I'm leaning much more that way. I'm asking the board where they are, because people on this board members have said, I need more time, I need more information, I need more discussion. So if we need that, we need to ask those questions or get that information if we're going to make that decision, if people are going to feel comfortable by November, or there's going to be, or there's 5 people on this board who may be ready to make decisions. I don't know, but we need to voice our opinions, and I'd like to give some people who haven't spoken yet time, because half of us have spoken and some of us haven't.
But you asked 2 things. So I'm ready to go with Newtown Middle, except if it's 6 through 8, and then I'm not ready to go at all. Right?
But I think Jerry's idea of getting to the point where we can give the administration direction, they can compartmentalize these projects with our direction and say, here's what it looks like over 5 years, here's what the implications are to appropriations, to revenues.
But 6 through 8 destroys the compartmentalization,
No.
that's all.
But if we can agree on the elements of the plan, they can come back to us by the 6th and give us something to vote on. Now, that being said, we haven't heard from that.
Only reason I would go to 6 to 8 is if when they redistricted at the elementary school, they told me that was the only way to do it. So other than that, I'm not particularly interested in going to 6 to 8. 2 years in that school, you're in, you're out, awkward time, all the reasons that I know there is some literature about the advantage of 6 to 8. I also am well aware that there are many schools that are 6 to 8. But me personally, what I've read for my personal own self is I prefer the 7th and 8th grade.
But 5 to 6 is also a big structural change, and so is.
I would be open to that at the elementary level. I think that's fine, and I'm not saying I would definitely vote against 6 to 8, but I need the redistricting to get the trailers off information to make that decision. But as far as, it's not my primary initiative to move 6.
But I'd want to hear from the administration about their thoughts about 5 to 6, because for me, it just,
Okay.
it
That's
just
a
breaks,
question. Doug?
it breaks the elementary
question.
schools up into segments. So, the PTO,
Thank
you know, people always complain about middle school PTOs, you're only there for 2 years, hard to get people. So now you're gonna have a PTO where it's K through 4, and then a PTO where it's 5 through 6. The bus routes are gonna be longer for 5 to 6, because the bus has to travel longer to get those people.
Okay.
So the busing part, but really all of that, the administration knows all of these things, and they may have an opinion. I
Yeah,
have not
what is
asked.
their opinion on grade configuration? That's fine.
Right.
Mrs. Brooks, did you want to speak?
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, I'm going to try not to repeat a lot of what's said, but so I'm conflicted because I feel firmly that, for the sake of the people that I represent and everybody else, that I want to be completely transparent. So if I'm not saying things, it doesn't mean I don't agree. I'm just in the understanding, respecting of time. I won't repeat things. First of all, can we just go back to that first slide? I just want to make sure that third bullet, and maybe it's obvious, maybe it's not, I don't know. For me, that's redistricting without closing schools, without modulars.
Redistrict with Wrightstown closed and without modulars.
Third bullet.
Oh, third, I'm sorry.
Redistricting without closing schools,
Without closing any schools.
without modulars.
Correct. Sorry.
Okay, it doesn't say, I just want to make sure that's clear. I have no interest in redistricting schools and keeping the modulars on. So I just want to, just asking.
Thank you.
I'm sort of all over the place because there were so many things said and I'm not sure how to, so in no particular order. I'm not ready to vote on Newtown Middle because I think the higher priority is Holland Middle. I would like to focus on Holland Middle because that will allow us to close Richboro Middle. So I would like to put the emphasis on what will save us money before we put the emphasis on just spending. Now I understand that there's something, we've talked about how we can run those things concurrently, but I'm also concerned that we're spending, if we renovate both middle schools, basically we are tying up all our funds and preventing anything else that's going on in other buildings that could be in need. So I'm just concerned about what the vision is for that and what the impact will be. So, and I respect the deadlines and the need to hurry a decision, but I'm just going to say for me, if I feel hurried, I'm voting no. Whatever it is, even if I have a leaning for something, this is not something that I can, this kind of decision I can't possibly make unless I'm 100% certain. So I would vote no, and in response to, the fact that it may cost $4 million more later if we wait, well, either there will be an agreement to do that, or I would say let's find ways to cut $4 million from the overall project to at least know then.
That's cutting programming at that point.
I don't agree with that. I don't necessarily agree with that. Maybe that means a renovation
show
instead
you.
of a rebuild. we have to make decisions at the time. I do not appreciate that sort of threat, because
It's not a threat.
But Doug, really, the costs are going to rise in everything. I have to make a decision in a moment. So I'm just trying to explain how I feel. And to me, knowing that the costs will go up for a delay, while it's something that I'm thinking about, in the overriding scheme of balancing the costs of all the renovations and all the other things we need to do, to me, I'm not comfortable with it. And my priority has been Holland Middle, so I don't want to take the focus off of that. If we can close that school, I think we should. And
Richburg.
For oh, did I say Holland Middle?
Yes.
I don't want to close Holland Middle.
Favorite school to make a mistake.
Right. I don't want to close Holland Middle.
Denise, I've heard you want to close Holland Middle.
I can't
I've
hear.
heard you want to close Holland Middle, is that true?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, actually, I mean, it's funny because you say that. I mean, I'm walking around and I continue to hear people saying, I don't understand why you disagree with your superintendent, and people come to public comment and say, you know, your superintendent recommended things, your administration recommends things. I don't think any of us were elected to simply rubber stamp everything the administration recommends. And to be clear, I don't disagree with the entire recommendation that the administration made. I disagree with some pieces of it. And reasonable people disagree. I mean, I don't think it's a function of, you know, by my disagreeing, I'm inconsiderate of students or inconsiderate of other things. There are a lot of things. You know, I don't agree that the cost of renovating Newtown Middle and rebuilding Newtown Middle is all that insignificant. Some people assess it, say, oh, considering that price differential, we should definitely rebuild Newtown Middle. I don't see that $8 million differential as insignificant or as balancing as others. So I just want to make that clear. The interesting thing, some people have said to me, and I don't even remember who said it, I guess it was Jerry, the conflict of closing a school versus the trailers and that, you know, push-pull. And I agree, but I just want to reiterate, in the north, there are no trailers. So that is not a conflict in the northern sending area. It is a significant conflict in the southern area, which is why I don't believe closing Rolling Hills at this time is possible. Because to move them out of a school and just perpetuating trailers, that does not, I can't reconcile that. But again, it all comes down to trusting the numbers. And while we use, you know, we want to use Schrader numbers, but I have other documents that indicate different numbers. So to me, the only way that I can become clear on, you know, making decisions like this is through seeing it in the redistricting. I believe it could fit. Show me if it can fit, and then I will be much clearer on that. I do like the idea of the creative thinking of breaking free of the configurations. We have to assess all possibilities to create the greatest efficiencies. But again, and I guess this was recently added because I was concerned that we didn't have an understanding of the administration clarifying for us what issues that would do. What does creating a 5-6 school do? I had a brief conversation with Joy McClendon, who's the Director of Elementary Education, last week, and at face value, there was no like dramatic red flag in terms of delivering education, but there are certainly issues that have to be addressed. It's not like a slam dunk, yeah, we could definitely do this. And the other thing is, I'm concerned about what the public response would be to that. I'm concerned about older siblings in 5th and 6th grade who are supposed to be coupled with younger siblings, and what does that break do? And, you know, basically changing from a student's experience of going through the system in 3 buildings versus 4 is a very different experience. How does that impact families? And so we would need, I think, that's not something we could decide by November 6th, because if we move to something that dramatic, that would require a whole more set of public dialogue, because that is a huge philosophical change. I don't think it's as big if you were going to move the 6th grades up to middle school, for example, but that imbalance I would want to look at. for the LSAC, I would like a tour of Twining Ford. I'd like to see it for myself. I understand, my conflict is some people have said that that's not a suitable location, but I have heard from parents of the program that it is a suitable location. So, I put a lot more weight into the people that run that program to tell me where the suitable location is, as opposed to my impression. I may look at it and say, I don't know, this doesn't look like it would be a great spot for this. But if the parents, the program director, the staff that's involved and live it every day say that's a great location, I am much more inclined to go with that. But I do also like the idea of using Chancellor, and I like the idea of relocating administrative services, or whatever we can, to North. The other thing, and I'm rambling because I have so many different notes, on the Newtown Middle thing, we're talking about new versus old, we're talking about grade configuration. The other thing that we had talked about previously that hasn't come up at the table today is, what is the size of that school? Because I heard some conversation about increasing the capacity of North to send more increasing the capacity of Newtown Middle School so that more students end up from North. And because that population, to make that happen, would come from Northampton, that has a redistricting component for the high school that I want to be sensitive to when we're redistricting elementary schools, because I'm pretty sure the notion is to not split elementary schools. So if we're looking at, how we would route a school through the system to North, what I've seen, the most likely contenders, I would think, are Richboro Elementary and possibly Welch, I'm not sure, but then it becomes a function of who's in those schools. And so when we take off trailers and we redistrict, and I'm just very sensitive to moving people around a lot. So we need to sort of get around what that might look like, even if we're not ready, even if that's a little bit further off in the distance. Oh, and then the other thing is, I want to have a conversation about if the redistricting once we see the redistricting of what Wrightstown, if we could close Wrightstown, and the redistricting shows that that's possible, it's important for me, just because it fits doesn't mean I would vote yes for it either, because I would want to understand what the will of this board would be in terms of repurposing that building, because I do not want to take that away from the community. So I'm not, I'd like to see it remain in our inventory in some way so that the fields could be used, the playground could be used, things within the building can be used for community purposes and stuff. So it's a more complicated thing. So we need to talk about, and I guess we should also talk about, to whoever spoke at public comment, about the repurposing of Richboro Middle. I think
I would like to make comment about some of my thoughts. I've been interjecting a few questions, but just a couple of things. I talked about LSAC on Thursday night. In the proposals that we received from the committee, and I read them several times and take them very seriously, part of my confidence in decision is based on their work. So both proposals recommended new at Newtown Middle. I was probably a little more on the fence, but because the work of that committee over the year went that way, I am putting some of my personal credence, where I might delve into more details on my own. I'm trying to balance how much detail I can do on it and how much I can just say, you know what, a lot of smart people looked at this and they gave me a recommendation, and that's what I asked them to do, and I read their reasonings, and it's logical for me. So the proposals mentioned repurposing LSAC, or trying to get out at least and look at Twining, closing Richboro, renovating Holland Middle, building new at Newtown Middle. Those were some of the things that I was able to take and feel confident about and have strong opinions on. Now, there was clearly closing elementary schools in those proposals as well. One saying close Wrightstown sooner, one saying it later. I don't know that that piece I'm fully comfortable with at this point, and that piece is the piece I'm looking for some redistricting and where would it go, and I need some more information. But I just want to mention that those people did a lot of work, and for me, some of my reasons for supporting things is coming because of the work that committee did. And I know this whole board respects what they did and found it very, very valuable, but I was just listening and trying to make notes on my own about things I haven't mentioned. That was it for me. Did any, Mr. Abramson, you haven't spoken yet. What?
Part of the things we were supposed to talk about, or to get ready to talk about, are the options for the models, for the administration. Before I say that, Doug, with regard to the inflationary cost to delay in building Newtown Middle, I get it, and I'm in favor of building a new Newtown Middle School. But part of that delay, or the cost, will be offset by the delay in issuing a bond for the construction. I guess Mr. Reinhardt can tell us the difference. It could be negligible, given the interest rates, but there will be some offset against the inflationary cost.
I will tell you that the inflationary costs are something that you'd spend, let's say, $55 million today. Because we don't do it today, we're going to pay $59 million. Anything for the financing of the bonds is something that you'll be delaying. You might not pay it this year, but you're going to pay it a year later. So that is not I would not look at that similarly. In fact, if the farther you delay, the more impact that interest rates could have on the whole plan. So in my mind, and I've always said this, time is of the essence when you look at borrowing, but delaying it isn't something you'll be putting off paying interest, but you're going to be paying interest on the bonds. If they're 20-year bonds, you're going to pay that over.
We're still paying it, but
yes,
there's a delay in paying
yes.
it. Okay. And part of what I'm saying is going to be impacted greatly by my feelings on the class size guidelines and the possibility of implementing a full-day kindergarten. So with that said, we have to look at also the best financial result for our school district versus what we spoke about before, the human factors. Now, Chancellor Elementary School, Newtown Middle School, Wrightstown Elementary School, they're all inextricably intertwined with the history and culture of Council Rock. I'm glad that this building, after it was closed, still remains in the school district control. Newtown Middle School, once the high school, it's sad to think that it can be knocked down, but again, the best financial result for the school district, in my opinion, is that will happen. And Wrightstown Elementary School, a quaint, comparably small school, Blue Ribbon School. If we lose that in the school district, it would be sad, but again, what I see of the enrollment figures, whether or not that should remain as an elementary school, I have grave doubts at this point. However, again, I temper that with my feelings about the class size and full-day kindergarten. What impact will closing Wrightstown Elementary School have on those two important factors? The other issue with regard to Wrightstown Elementary School, a delay in closing it. My concern is the renovation costs in the next few years to Wrightstown Elementary School if we delay in closing. Doug, do you have a figure for the next couple of years, what we put in with regard to the normal maintenance and as well as renovations for Wrightstown Elementary School?
I don't have it off the top of my head. We do have some numbers that we looked at, though, that I could get back to you on.
Okay, because that would be another important issue in my mind. With regard to options to the administration for models, I would say give us something with regard to the largest possible Newtown Middle School, the largest possible renovations to Holland Middle School, and putting the 6th grade into the middle schools, freeing up space in the elementary schools So I'm comfortable that we can maintain our class size guidelines, and I believe we could then implement a full-day kindergarten, even if it's just on a lottery basis for the beginning. So that would be options that I would give to the administration for Newtown Middle School and Holland Middle School. So-
Doug, I'm sorry. Can you get that?
I'm sorry.
He would like the administration.
I heard it, you got it.
But do you want to type it in?
Yeah, can we?
Oh, sorry, yes.
Do you-
Can you
I'm
take?
missing the typing over my head, I apologize.
Can you add that, we would like to look at making the middle school 6 to 8, see if I say this
Holland
correctly.
and Newtown.
Yeah, middle school level, 6 to 8. And would there be space for some level of full-day kindergarten if we did that? Correct? Yes? Did I
Yes, and
restate
that's,
that?
again, that's just options. I'm not
Keeping
even saying
class size. That was
I
the
want to
other
make it clear, I'm not saying I would vote for that, but I'm saying that's an option that we have to consider. And then educationally, is 6 to 8 the best thing for the students, or is our model that we have now best? These are things that we have to look at.
Okay. Mr. Gruff would like to speak.
For me, you know, I see a problem for us. DOES.
Thank you.
No problem. I does it all the time. For me, you know, I think we have a lot of great ideas, and I think that we ask them of the administration, and I think that before I want the administration to spend a lot of time doing it, I think the board has to have some notion, give the administration some notion of whether we want to go down that path. So with all due deference to the considerations about full-day kindergarten, having seen Joy's presentation the other day about the expense, the space, the time, there is the question that remains. I would tell you right now and ask, how many people on this board are interested right now in potentially implementing a full-day kindergarten anytime in the next 2 years? Because if we're not there, then I want to cut that off now, because to have the administration continue to spend time researching something where there isn't even a potential for the breadth of the board to do it, that's
Any
a waste of
comments?
time. So that's one. I'm not done. I'm sorry.
Oh, I thought you wanted-
We can have that discussion, but I need the,
But not
so,
here to keep talking.
what? Well, I mean, so that's one
We'd
thing.
like to have that discussion, but
Well, I have 2 other points I want to make.
I'll
One-
make sure we go back. We'll
Okay,
go back.
yes, yeah, fine.
Let's
As
do
long as
that.
you
I'll
come
make
back
sure
to
we
my
go
other
back
2
to Mr.
points,
Gruff.
that's
We
fine,
won't
but let's
let it-
have a
Just
discussion.
a quick comment or two on full day?
On full day, so when Rick says 6 to 8 and add K, I'm interested in that, especially if it can just be a quick estimate by a back of the envelopes, because sometimes you actually have to do the district boundaries to see if it makes sense, and sometimes you can kind of estimate to see if it could work.
You can estimate it, but it is predicated on rebuilding both middle schools. You
Right.
can't do
Yes.
it with
Okay,
the
so now we're on the
Right.
middle schools, and I was trying to talk about.
But, I mean,
because I have something about.
But I wanted
Wait a
to,
second,
I did want to say in,
Wait a second,
just,
Bill, I'm sorry.
okay.
Mark, what were you saying?
Mr. Abramson's question is a good one, and one of the 3 recommendations talks about a reframing of the middle of the 6 to 8 program. I agree with Mrs. Brooks strongly. If you're going to do that, it's a longer conversation than to November, but it's predicated on 3 years out, because you have to rebuild both of your middle schools to about 1,200 kid capacities before you move everything in.
So you
That's the
could,
only thing I would
bullet
say.
point a couple assumptions and say if you did it, so you'd be interested in seeing it.
Yeah,
Would
wait,
others on this
but
board be interested in seeing it?
can I just add one,
That
can I
was
add
the
one
point.
little
Okay.
asterisk to it?
Full day kindergarten.
Right.
We're asking if we,
Are we gonna, but here's my question. Okay, I'm gonna take it back.
You started it.
Well, I had the question, but because then you jumped to the 6 to 8 discussion. So here's my problem with the 6 to 8. I'm sorry to take it back, but if you want to wrap it all together as a package,
ahead,
then I
go.
had commentary on that before, which was the 6 to 8 right now, it's not compatible with our current thinking. So for me, you know, we're talking about, and so my question was, and I was very careful about my time frame, was this would be in a 2 to 3 year time frame. Are we interested in K to 6? Now I understand, not K to 6, geez, full day kindergarten. I understand the thought is, well, we could build out the height, we'd have to build out the middle schools differently. And my point was, that's, if we already look at the numbers we're looking at, and there's already consideration about the pushback about what those numbers would be, to further exacerbate those numbers by increasing the size of the middle school, we've already heard, you know, and the commentary, and it's not incorrect, it's a perspective, and I don't disagree with it, which says, you know, that was 55, what can we do for 35, you know, or less? So I don't know, you know, what is the board willing to pay to make a middle school bigger? And I thought 55 was pretty much the top end at this point. Now, if we're thinking for a middle school, if we're thinking that is open, well, you're right, we could do full-day kindergarten, because then we don't have any monetary bounds, and I don't think we're there. So for me, the 6 and 8 going up is not compatible with what we're doing now and any of the planning we had. So for me, 6 to 8's off the table. For me, at this point, full-day kindergarten is probably off the table too, because it's not compatible with what we're looking to do generally. Now, is that to say that 3 to 4 years later, we might have to look at something different, or might be in a position to look at something different? That's true. But that goes to the third point I want to talk about, which is empirical versus hypothetical. Hypothetical being another term for what we refer to as projections. Our projections and our thoughts and what could we potentially get in that school, it's great, but it is so subject to interpretation as to be unworkable. And to get 9 of us to coalesce, or 5 of us to coalesce on what that is right now, is a chore. I think at some level, we have to stop trying to figure out the 90%. We have to just at some level right now deal with the empirical numbers we have. Work with the empirical. I don't think anybody will disagree, given the enrollment we have, that's the enrollment we have. And the projection maybe a year out, we have a high confidence. 2 years out, we're pretty confident. Beyond that, I don't want to say all bets are off, but you know, you're holding a twig by the base, and the end moves a lot when you're starting to do projections. So for me, this 90%, I haven't even looked at, you know, you talk candidly, the Schrader thing about 90%, 80% should be 100%. I can't put credence in any of it. I'm dealing with empirical numbers. That's what I want to base it on, is what does it take for me to get next year? Because I know what I got this year. I'm pretty confident what I have next year. Let me get those figured out. How much will it change? 40 people, 70 different opinions. So for me, for right now, for me, full-day kindergarten, it's a non-starter. I'd be willing to make a motion, and then we can make motions at this meeting, it's a public meeting, that we direct the administration not to pursue the consideration.
Can we just see people verbally?
We can talk about it, but you know, if that's what it takes, we'll come back to that.
We need a motion if we're seeing.
I did kind of want to add my asterisk. I would be much in favor of Rick's 6 to 8 and Ed K full-time kindergarten than splitting out the 5 and 6. Now, I know I'm waiting for the administration's recommendation on that, but the splitting out the 5 and 6 just feels completely wrong to me.
Okay.
So just throwing that out.
Okay.
So for me, having taught in a building for 15 years, 6 to 8, I don't like the idea at all of putting 6th graders with 8th graders. We've had it here at Council Rock in the past. Educationally, I don't think it's not the education piece so much that hurts the kids, but the distraction for 6th graders of trying to compete with 8th graders is not healthy for them, in my opinion. And being in 6th grade and being the big kids in the building and offering the big kids role in the building for the younger kids, I think it builds their egos, builds their strength, and prepares them for that tumultuous time of adolescence, pre-adolescence, 7th and 8th grade. How they fare through those 7th and 8th grade years predicts a lot of how they're going to do in high school. And I just think that extra strengthening of being in the elementary school one more year is really, really good for them. My own children were in 6th grade at Rolling Hills, stayed together as a group. Now, I'm not against looking, as I said, I'm not sure it would work, the busing and all of that. Keeping them in a 5th and 6th grade together, I'm not so against, or I'm good with looking at that, but I don't want to see 6th grade children educated with 8th graders in the world we live in today. I want them kept with the little kids for one, or younger kids, or their own age group for one more year. Full-day kindergarten is something they're doing all over the country. Educationally, people say it's important for children to have early and preschool childhood. care education. I agree with that, theoretically. I don't, it is extremely important for children to live in impoverished settings, or settings where there are deficiencies in ability of children to access books and people who speak the English language clearly, who can provide security, safety, food security, and direction to young children. In our community, we have provided an option for after-school childcare in many of our buildings. It's cumbersome because everybody wants to be in the pattern that'll get them covered all day. I really don't like the idea of 5-year-olds being in school all day long. I don't like the idea that they'd be doing little memo worksheets in the morning and then they'd be doing them again in the afternoon. If you ask me what's the best to educate a 5-year-old, the work of a 5-year-old is play. Interaction with other playmates, running outside, grabbing leaves, digging in the dirt, trumping through a creek. That's what the work of a 5-year-old is. And in this day, and I know I'm not, the whole idea of Common Core and the idea that we are now in the state of Pennsylvania going to judge a teacher, a history teacher, 25% of their evaluation will be based on the work of the reading and math teachers. This puts so much pressure in a system that they are going to work really, really hard on those kindergartners and first graders and second graders to pass those tests. I think that should be avoided at all costs. Not that they shouldn't do well in a standardized measure so we know they're doing okay, but it shouldn't be a do or die deal. And I feel that that pressure that used to be in 4th grade is now in 3rd grade, and now in 2nd grade, and now in 1st grade, and God forbid we do it to 5-year-olds. And so I don't trust that they're going to be appropriately educated in public school right now. I would prefer that 5-year-olds come in the morning, go home in the afternoon, or sleep in the morning and play in the morning and go to school in the afternoon. I don't like the whole day idea of it. I don't think I truly don't believe it's appropriate. Now, do moms go to work? Will my own daughter go to work? Will my nieces go to work? Yes. And so there's this problem that the moms have with this. And I don't know how to resolve it so much, but I heard somebody say somebody has to take care of our children. That's not our function. We are not a babysitting center. We're an educational center who tries to do what is most educationally appropriate for children. And I don't believe that being in school for 6 hours, and for some kids coming here at 7 o'clock in the morning and not being picked up till 6 o'clock, I do not believe that's appropriate, and I don't want to participate in it.
So that's a no on full day.
That was
Okay.
Mrs. McCasey. Mrs. McCasey has not had a chance to talk tonight, this morning, wherever we are. Mrs. McCasey.
I'll start from here and then work my way backwards. I would say, and we sat at Academic Standards the other night and talked about full-day kindergarten, and I don't know that and you just said it's a struggle for you. I don't know. These children are, in most cases, in Joy Hut percentages, out all day. So I think it's a discussion of where are the needs of the children and the families best served, because I forget the percentages. I was very surprised it was that high.
25%.
Yeah, it was like 160 something out of 500 or something.
In I'll give you, in Joy's assessment of 400 some odd students, there were another 165 that get introduced to the school district at first grade. So that 160, well, maybe it was 125, but then there were another 65 who are transported from our kindergarten to another facility, providing them additional services. So altogether, it came out to approximately 25% of the first graders who start have enjoyed a full-day kindergarten somehow, either, or full-day services that they have not. 75% of them have returned home. 25% have not returned home.
Right, but that did not account for students who might be going to some other location
other
that we
aftercare.
don't
Right.
bus to.
Correct.
So-
correct. Back to Kyle.
This year's just to help, this year's kindergarten enrollment is approximately 530 kids. This year's first grade is approximately 730. And that's what we've typically seen, is about a 1/4 to 1/3 in migration from kindergarten to first grade. Some of that's move-in, so it's not entirely, but you can assume that the majority of that is full-day kindergarten programs elsewhere that are moving into the district.
And there's also the recognition of
Let's let
that. There's also the recognition in that kindergarten is not a mandated function, that you can elect not to send your child to kindergarten at all. So some of those would have been.
Yeah, but I asked that question and we don't
Happens
see
very
anything.
rarely.
I mean,
Yeah.
Back to Kyle.
So we also left that night with a discussion of sending the administration back to come back with some other pieces. So I'm not interested in taking that off the table as a discussion before I have more information. I agree with Patty wholeheartedly. I do not like the thought of 6th graders going to school with 8th graders. The age discrepancies there, and when I think about my own daughter who has an August birthday, and we chose not to send her to kindergarten that first year that she was eligible, when I look at the age difference between the kids in that particular setting, who the parents that would have chosen to send their children to school in that August versus those who did not, you could be looking at a just turning 12-year-old with a 15-year-old. I think developmentally that is not the best situation for kids. I can't even imagine the busing, really. I will say that since these discussions have come about, it's been emotionally some of the hardest issues for me to deal with, because although I firmly believe that I represent every child and every family in this district, and I think we all operate on that premise, I really do. This has been a little bit tougher for me because the discussions of closing Wrightstown, first, you know, that school feels like my heart and soul. That is where I have virtually raised my kids. It's my obligation, however, to maintain objectivity at all costs. I didn't put my hand on a Bible to say that I would swear to keep that school open if we can illustrate, or it is determined, that it is in the best interest of this district financially that it has to close. So I am clear that that might be an option at some point. I don't feel we're there yet. I would like to consider any option that does not deprive one community, one municipality, to be the only school. I realize you can make a case that Newtown Borough does not have a school, but to be the only municipality without a school just seems not in the spirit of who we are as a district. So I can see that there might come a time. I also am unsure of the faith I can have in enrollment numbers, the predictions of enrollment numbers moving forward. The fact for me is in 2008, we spent so much time talking about how no one could have predicted everything that happened to this economy. I don't know how we can then say that that recovery is completely predictable as well. So if we're in a position where this economy is beginning to recover, houses are going on the market, the real estate industry is seeing a comeback, I don't know how we can predict what that looks like just yet. I don't want everybody to have to wait years and years and years. I don't want to kick this down the road and avoid it, but I don't feel as if we're there at this point in time. And I think looking further at redistricting for savings makes more sense to me and is also more aligned with who we are and the way that we feel about community. I'm not suggesting that anybody here doesn't care about that. And I know that we could all say that the schools that our children have attended are near and dear to our heart. I don't think we can say Wrightstown needs to stay open because it's a small school. I don't feel that that's a fair argument that we can all sit here and say that it needs to close simply because it's a small school either. So I just think the imbalance it creates as well in terms of all those schools on the northern side of the district, I think is something to consider. It is not a reason that it needs to stay open, but it's a consideration in my head. I am in favor of Newtown Middle School moving forward with those renovations. It's less of a struggle for me because I feel as we've been talking about it for so many years. I have concerns about renovations as opposed to building new because I don't know what we're going to find when we get in, and perhaps you could add to that.
You said you're in favor of it
I'm
sounded
in
like...
favor of building new
Okay.
as opposed to renovate, I'm sorry. I don't know what we're going to find when we get in there. It's not even for me so much about the time that it takes. You know, obviously the disruption to children, those kids will be significantly less impacted by those renovations if we build new. I don't think $8 million is a small number. My fear, I would have a fear that we'd end up spending that if we renovate, when you start to take a building like that apart and really get into the guts of that construction. And I think that's it. And I do want to be careful, to Jerry's point, where I think where you were starting to go, Jerry. We do have to come to some consensus as to what we're charging this administration to do, because I feel that we're not always allowing them to have time to do their day jobs. And so we have to figure out what it is that we're asking and come to some agreement, because if we had, so to your point of, I think that's where you were going with pull full-day kindergarten, because you thought that was a place we could take something back. So I get that. I just don't know how necessarily we get there.
So,
So
Mr.
you're still open to full-day kindergarten?
I am still open. I'm still open to the discussion.
Trying to summarize,
absolutely.
I'm just trying to figure out.
I think it is great for the community. I'd like to see it happen. Personally, for me, I just don't know, we just don't have the space. It's
Well,
separate from the
So just let me, on the one of the good reasons for full-day kindergarten is to help children who need that extra time. So out of the 500 new kindergartners, when the teachers bring them in and meet them at the beginning of the year and assess them, when you find a child who is so far below the peers, below all of the peers, there may be, and I don't know, it would cost money to bus them, or whether you put one full-day kindergarten in the upper regions and a full-day kindergarten in the lower regions, that limits class size to 10, 12, 15 kids, a very low number of only those children who need that academic support. These are children who may, if you don't do that for them, be on the failing edge of kindergarten. But if given that more intense experience with a teacher and an aide, might then have the opportunity to, by the time they get to the end of kindergarten and going into first, might not need those special education services that they might have needed if we didn't do that for them. So there is a way to look at it, not as something that we do because we're doing it for everybody, but to deal with kids that are really at the lowest ends of what we need. So when there might be a pilot project that deals with academic need, not just the idea of full-day kindergarten. I'm not against looking at that. I had the opportunity to spend time watching a transitional first grade last year. Little children who came to school who had not been in school before, little kids who were not really impoverished, but nobody talked to them apparently a lot at home because some of them came almost nonverbal to school. Little kids who screamed and cried for a week before they settled in. All different kinds of things. And by June, those little kids were just like other little kindergartners throughout the district. But they had received intense support in kindergarten. So that might be something that we can throw in for looking at.
Would the term be, because I hate the low end, because that's just not a term. But I think you would agree that, and I don't disagree, that there's an aspect here for children who would be, quote, at risk, quote, educationally, where if they were identified
early enough.
that's, And I don't see that
And I
that's...
don't mean kids that have necessarily a defined disability, because
That's fine.
they should be receiving preschool
They're
care
at risk.
from the IU from 3 to 5. But kids who are outside, they're within the range of normal, but need, we find them. It's odd that they're found here today, but within that range, who we could give extra support to.
And I don't disagree with that from the perspective of that, you know, we heard the other day, today, I don't remember the whole Common Core discussion about, somebody spoke to the fact that when you integrate someone who doesn't have the language skills in a classroom, if they haven't had English as a first language yet, and they don't speak English, how do you really serve them and continue to serve everybody in an integrated classroom? So you're right, for that sort of situation, kindergarten, maybe full-day kindergarten, would be appropriate because you need to get to the level for appropriate entry into first grade.
Again, I would not say ESL kids, because that's a whole different thing too.
Could potentially.
All right.
I just want to say that I want to make clear what the next steps from the administration are relative to full-day kindergarten. Just want to repeat it, that we asked them to come back to us with an understanding of what surrounding districts have done, so that we can frame it.
From the meeting the other night, just to clarify,
I'm
not
sorry,
from today.
I'm
Yes,
sorry, from the
yes.
academic standards
Yeah.
meeting last Thursday.
Yes.
So I just want to say that
That's true.
I'm on the fence about the merits of full-day kindergarten in general. But in all fairness, in my mind, because of space limitations and cost, I have not given it a considerable amount of thought, because I just did not think it was feasible in Council Rock. It is absolutely appropriate at this point, given that most of the districts around us do this. I do feel, even if it's not something we can implement right away, it feels like it's in our future for some future board. And so in the scope of everything that we're doing right now, it is absolutely appropriate to look at a 6 to 8 configuration that would allow that, just so that it can be part of all the information that we process while we deliberate things.
Okay. Any other comments on this side about it? Otherwise, I think Mr. Block worked on summarizing a few things that he wanted to say. Other things on full-day kindergarten? Mr. Abramson, go first, and then we'll go to Mr. Block. I mean, Mr. Bilic,
No,
sorry.
it's just regarding the concerns to the 6 to 8 configuration, that you're concerned about 6th graders being with 8th graders. With regard to at least Newtown Middle, maybe the renovations of Holland, you can have the schools constructed so that the grades are separated. That's possible architecturally to do, Doug?
Do anything with
I can tell you that,
that
in my old...
Jerry, please, feasibly, educationally.
No, what I could tell you is in my old life, I worked on Saucon Valley School District, where they turned their high school into a K through 12 facility, right? I'm not saying that's ideal, I'm saying that's what they wanted, that's what their program was. We separated those grade structures by common spaces. So yes, you can separate them to some degree, and I would respectfully like Mark to weigh in more on that than myself. However, physically you can separate them to some degree, but there will be common spaces where they will eventually interact. You know, you have those spaces where they're going to see each other when they're switching around classes. But cafeterias, gymnasiums, common space, libraries, common space, buses, things like that.
Okay, Mr. Bilic.
My thoughts on full-day kindergarten. Personally, I don't think it's any surprise to anyone here, but I'm not in support of full-day kindergarten. I think that kids should be home as much as possible, they should play as much as possible, and just to add that other, there's other hours to the days, doesn't make sense to me. I also don't think that we can afford it with space or financially. That said, I wasn't elected to bring my own views to my votes, so if I hear from, and I've asked the question, and if I hear that the majority of the folks that I'm elected to represent, if they want that, then I'd be in support of it. If I can speak to, just wrap up a couple other things. In reference to the proposal for the 5th and 6th grade centers and some other options as far as shifting classes, I really hope we don't get stuck in the mud with where we are today. I appreciate and hear your concerns about having 6th graders with 8th graders, and I went through and I remember myself, I came to this school, kindergarten through 3rd, Goodnoe from 4th to 5th, Newtown Intermediate, we called it at the time 6th to 8th, and then the high school 9th I wrote 9th through 10th, but I really did graduate, so. And it really was just fine. So I think, we had a big graduating class. I think everyone did just fine in it, and I think that from being a 6th grader at Newtown Intermediate with 8th graders was just fine with me. I didn't experience, but the class after me had 9th graders in the same building, even though they were separated part of the day, well, the full day. So I hope that we don't get stuck in the mud with, well, this is what we want to, this is how we do it, and this is how we're going to stick with it. In reference to Newtown Middle, I don't know if you're ever going to get me there to build new, but I have to tell you, by my count, you've got 5 votes. If you have 5 votes, I urge you to move forward, taking into account interest rates, inflation, and whatnot. So, again, I could get a lot more information. We could vote 6 months from now, and I would probably still be a no at building a brand new school at $55 million. But to savings, you've got to look at the potential savings of waiting, or the cost of waiting, if you already have the votes.
That's what I was trying to assess earlier, without forcing people to,
Well, I just tallied as we were talking, and I have to tell you, it's irresponsible to wait just to wait, I think. One other thing, Bob, could we look at issuing 0 coupon bonds instead of traditional bonds? Does everyone know 0 coupon bonds are bonds you pay a discount, so you may issue instead of a $1 million issue, it may come down to something like $210,000 issue, and you pay an inflated balloon payment at the end, but you don't pay interest along the way. It may not be appropriate, but it was just a thought I had.
I'd like to understand how you want to structure that bond issue, because a lot of that I'll explain in my mind. Build an asset, your asset starts depreciating as you go. 0 coupon bonds are deep discount bonds where it's a $5,000 bond and you pay $1,000 for it, and in 20 years you'll get your $5,000. So your asset is decreasing in value while your liability is increasing in value. And unless there's a structure to it, I'd probably say, no, I wouldn't want to do that.
Well, the only reason I'm thinking of it is because we have the perfect storm of pension increases in 100 to 200 million in renovations and building. So if we could, my only thought, and again, it just for discussion, I'm not recommending it, but just for discussion, maybe for a portion of it, we could look at that and see how it models out. Make sense?
Yes, I would put a model in. If it was something that would help us manage our debt service, then I would definitely look at it. But to fundamentally look at what you described, and what I traditionally look at when you do 0 coupons, I look at it and think, that's not something I would propose ever. But if there's a proposal that you'd show me that would work and make sense, I'd go for it.
Right. Just a thought.
It's 11:15. And Mr. Block has said to me that he thinks he has summarized some things and recapped kind of the nature of the discussion here. So I'd like to have him maybe read that or discuss that and see if anybody has anything else they want, because by 11:30, I'd like to do the final public comment so that we can stay on track. I think this has been a good and productive discussion. We certainly have a lot of questions. And so I'm going to let him go, and then we can talk about how we're going to wrap up and get to October 2nd.
Excellent. And keep in mind, this was just the commonality, consistency. I heard there's lots of questions, but I think what's important is giving the administration some focus in terms of coming back and developing a plan. Just to add my 2 cents on the full-day kindergarten, I would love to see us have it based on the cost and our building capacity and where we are in developing this plan. I don't think it's feasible, so I would not be in support of looking at it now. I also don't agree with the 6 to 8 piece. I don't agree that 6th graders should be 8th graders. I want to do my due diligence about the 5 to 6 option that we saw. My gut tells me I don't like pulling 5 and 6 off those younger kids. I think that's and pulling those communities a little farther apart. But I will give it diligence. That's just where I stood on those 3 things. But what I heard is, and then this is riffing off of Jerry, what would probably make most sense to have the administration go back and spend the majority of its time on, along with some of these other questions where we could work them in and come back to us prior to, and Mark, you can probably tell us what the best timeline is, prior to the 6th, so we could clarify and get to a place where we could vote, is is coming up with a plan. And that plan would mean a timeline of activities and all of the financial impacts that go along with those over a certain time period. Based on your experience, I would suggest that probably needs to be, 5 years, give or take. And we deal, to Jerry's point, with the elementary. So what I heard in the elementary was a full redistricting based on optimizing the actual space in the buildings and based on removing the trailers. I also think over a 5-year time period, based on what that redistricting tells us, you might make the suggestion, or we would like to see the options of consolidation of middle schools, and if so, which ones would make sense.
Middle or elementary?
Elementary, I'm sorry.
Elementary,
I'm
consolidation
only
of elementary.
right now, sorry. From a middle school perspective, probably makes most sense to take a look at what renovating Holland looks like, building a new Newtown looks like, and closing and possibly repurposing or selling Richboro. Also, anything that would be important from your perspective relative to feeder patterns and redistricting. And then the last piece is really around, I grouped it as all other. So that's how can we get out of LSAC while making the appropriate accommodation for the Achieve program and Sloan programs? How do we fill excess capacity that we've got at North? And those things kind of go together, I think. And then Twanny Ford probably comes into that conversation. The one thing that we haven't mentioned is the house track, and we have flexibility because we own it. When do we pull the trigger on that within this plan?
Does the administration have an opinion on it, if that was part of your plan?
So for me, if that's the general consensus, if we're 80%, everybody's.
The only other thing I would like to say is, because I thought I heard 5 people in favor of looking at full-day kindergarten, and it seems a little unclear. So because it was tied to the 6 to 8. So can I just poll, do people want the administration to model out or look at full-day kindergarten? Patty, or no? Bill?
Yeah, with the middle schools
Yes.
being sick.
Yes.
Yes. Denise, I think Kyle said yes. I'll ask her.
She's right
Do you want to look at full-day kindergarten?
Yes or no?
We're just doing yes or no? Sure. See, like, I'm a yes. 1, 2, 3, 4. You're, Mr. Block, you're a no?
I believe that what it makes sense to do is.
It's a yes or a no, Mr. Block?
I don't think we come up with what we started in academic standards, because I don't believe we can do it now. so
That's
we're
what you
wasting
said, so I think you're a no. Mr. Abramson?
Yes. No.
No, so it's 5 to 4.
It's 5 to 4, so
Continue the
he has
administration
to
looking at it.
look at it, whether it's tied to 6 to 8, some people are yes or no on 6 to 8. I think we're gonna let Mr. Klein kind of model that, but that's the only thing. Did anybody else have another major bullet point to walk away with?
Well, the introduction of the house track becomes a discussion point which we didn't have. For me, just, I don't see the urgency around house. So of the myriad of things that we're dealing with right now, house, again, would be a one-time infusion of funds if we were to do it. And it doesn't give us an enduring value. So for right now, for me, I'm not jumping on the house track. It's not going to become less valuable over time. We're not in the business of trying to make it an investment, but for right now, while we're trying to settle out everything else, it's of no consequence. For me, it's of no consequence.
Yeah, I'm in the same place. It sits on the side, but I wanted to mention it.
Wendy, you asked if there are any more bullets. I haven't been looking up there very much. I mean, one thing jumped out at me, and I asked it corrected. I've been paying attention. Can we get this and then just add
Wait
more
for 1
feedback?
second. We'll summarize everything that I've been,
Yeah, look, he's
I
got
got
10
40
pages.
pages, but we will summarize this into a grid that says, this is what we heard you say, this is what our timeline is, and this is when we think we can put it back to the board. And we'll do everything we can, given the constraints that our team has, to get it to you prior to your November 6th meeting so you can look at it.
November 6th.
Your
Prior to
November
October 2nd?
meeting. There's not a chance this gets.
Yeah, no, and I think that the follow-on from this, though, is from a public perspective, we've got at least 3 meetings that are coming.
Yeah.
So I think it's important that and I don't know if it's some public recap of the notes that we said, this is what we've tasked the administration to take a look at. So when they provide public comment, it's around the redistricting conversation, the trailers conversation, potential closure of schools. You know, the recommendations have fueled us to a good place, but now this is what we're really asking the administration to do. This is not any of the information that we've seen prior.
So-
I just want to understand, when are we going to get like a recap? I want to make sure that my
Sometime
understanding.
next week at our earliest possible.
So you didn't just, because I was like,
Mark.
you didn't just say we're getting a recap and no.
No, the
I said
answers,
Tuesday, I already scheduled a meeting with these gentlemen to go over this, put it in a grid, and hopefully at the end of that meeting, I can give it back to you and say, refine it.
Can you establish, when you do that, if you would establish the man hours required to do each of the tasks? Because that may be one of the things for us when we look at them, because some of them from a prioritization, I don't want the, when you can deliver it, because that implies what else you're doing. I want you to assign to each of the tasks the man hours, just for lack, or FTE hours required to do it, because right now, some of them may not be, when we look at it, it's 40 hours to do it, we may go,
no,
that's
exactly.
not valuable to us.
Related to that, if you need more resources, I mean, this may sound silly, but if there's people you trust that are curriculum coordinators that we can get, or whoever, that we can get substitute, this is so important for the community. If there's anyone that you can actually use, people who are retired or whatever, please ask.
I would, and again, you know, you've got principals who know these buildings and what they can take better than anything else, and hopefully they're our future. That this might not be a bad opportunity to get them involved, but again, just a suggestion.
I want to be careful about that. And I want to be careful about that because sometimes the persons involved come with a preconceived notion of what they want to achieve as well. And this is, no?
That's why we did the Vader thing.
That's why I want to be a little careful about that because they can give input,
Okay,
but it's
so
going to come out.
Let Mr.
Give a
Klein,
man a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
let's let Mr. Klein look at what we've asked, reframe it in a way and tell us. But there is some things, if, you know, I would ask this board to give some thought. I mean, we can put that we're getting answers to all these questions out to the community, and so we're gonna come listen to you on October 9th, but I think that's a little iffy.
Sorry, just two comments. First of all, I think develop 5-year plan timeline cost is a huge task for the administration right now. And I also don't see anything about, and maybe it's just included in others with LSAC, but there was
Yeah,
a lot of
LSAC was on
discussion about Achieve.
It was on there, it's on there.
Okay, so maybe we just highlight that a little differently to make
So
sure.
I guess when Mr. Klein puts this out to us, if we could, we may need to coalesce on October 2nd about what our priorities are out of these things that we need in order to make potential decisions and where we think we have 5 people around certain topics. To the point of, if we have 5 people wanting to move ahead with Newtown Middle, then we might as well say, build Newtown Middle is going to be one of our motions on November 6th.
Right.
So I think on October 2nd, we'll have the chart of work. We'll try to frame it in a logical way, and the discussion will be, what is this board's priorities, and what do we have some semblance that we want to move forward on? Because I think having a public meeting on the 9th and saying, oh, by the way, we've asked the administration to look into these 10,000 things, and then people are like, well, are you doing them? Are you not doing them? I heard 2 people say they like them. I heard 4 people say they don't know. You know, it's just confusing for the public, and I don't think it's what we want.
In the same way that we had the potential to say, this evening, look at that. We had the potential to say, stop with full-day kindergarten. I think we need to put up straw men when we meet that talk about how many people, and we have to go through the board and say, this item in absence of everything else, because we can't tie them to other things. Right now, let's just say, would you consider it, would you not? If you say no, then they're dead.
Yeah.
And just.
Or you could say, the other thing I think we can say is, these are the ones we absolutely want to consider. These are ones we want to consider, but we're not going to be able to decide by November 6th. And these are ones we don't want to consider. So I don't think we have to just say, like, full-day kindergarten, I would like to consider. Do I have to consider it by November 6th? Only in some general sense to give me a sense of purpose to move forward, but I don't, you know. So that's what I think.
just want to clarify, because somebody said this to me when I was out and about. It's not like everything stops November 6th, because November 20th, we'll be here talking about some other stuff too. But I mean, that was just a goal for some of the biggest things that we can accomplish so that we're making movement on the capital plan.
Right.
But it's not like everything's going to be decided on the 6th. And
no.
It's a, you know.
By no means. It was just to move something.
A 5-year plan makes adjustments over time based on what happens.
Okay, so I want to commend the board. We've done a lot of good work. We've started the conversation. The public has heard from every...
Excuse me, Doug, did you save that?
We
get along a lot better.
I saved it, but it's just sitting on there right now.
Okay. I'm sorry.
That's okay. No, go.
Go back and pull it as a file and send it to you and I and Bob, just so it doesn't get lost, okay?
You can take it off the big
Yeah,
screen
can
if you
turn the
want.
big screen off.
So we don't watch all your...
Thank you.
Okay, so I think we've done a lot of good work. You heard from every member of this board. We've done a number of topics. We will have discussion time again, as you've heard, on October 2nd. The listserv of our meetings has gone out. We are going to be looking into putting it in the newspaper. And, you know, there's great that there's some new people here and handful people, and you may only care about part of it, but please talk to your friends and your community members. This is an ongoing topic, and we are looking for public comment. We're going to close with 30 minutes of public comment. And so if you could line up on the side, I'm going to ask, I don't know how many people want to speak, but I'm again going to request that we try to stay to the 3 minutes. If you don't need all 3 minutes and you want to just simply express your support or your thought on something, don't feel obligated to take the 3 minutes, because with the more people we can have talk. Some people on this board have obligations they need to get to, so I said that I would end this meeting by noon. So I apologize if we don't get to hear everybody. We will do our best. We will certainly not have a time limit at the October meetings for everyone to say fully what they'd like. With that, I'd like to go ahead and start. Please state your name and your town. Thank you.
Jenny Schottmiller from Wrightstown. I wanted to just say a couple of things. When the meeting on Thursday, I heard about the idea of not sending kids from Northampton up through North, leaving that capacity at North so you can use it. So in the thing that I handed out, which I will email later, it leaves everyone in Northampton in Northampton. And my question is if you do that, the recommendation 1 made a bigger Newtown Middle School, so you go from 6 teams to 8. If you leave everyone in Northampton going to South, do you need a bigger Newtown Middle School? When I went back and looked at February facilities minutes, it had 30 million to just renovate, and 47 was your number to build or to renovate with a small expansion. I'm wondering if you build new but smaller, could it be less? I would like that as a community member for that to be less. When I was reading online, a lot of studies say that children do worse when 6 is with 8, and I will point out that in my plan, I put busing. I put 5 and 6-year-olds on the bus with 7 and 8. Maybe if you save $1.5 million a year, you could put extra bus monitors. I don't know, just an idea. I'm not stuck with this idea as a community member. I'm just trying to show a way that you could save money by splitting kids up and concentrating kids in a different way. At the elementary level, and I wanted to just, since I can't present this in 3 minutes, just tell you what's in it. I have an overall plan with a timeline. I have school districts that do other things than 6 to 8. I have the savings compared to the recommendations. I have the path to high school. I have a comparison of the average class size impact it raises. It's closer to your academic standards. I compare the number of classrooms you need to what's in the Schrader report. So forget 90 and 100% because it gets confusing. It's not a 1-to-1 ratio for some real weird reason. If you just look at how many classrooms, if the Schrader report's accurate, do you have the kids that fit? Right now you don't. That's why you have trailers. If you did this plan, you have the same number of needed classrooms as you have actual classrooms in existence today. It matches up. I have sort of a summary of how the kids move and the impact overall compared to the total capacity. And I did a retrospective savings if you had had this model in the last 7 years, how much you would save. Somebody out here found a mistake already. When I email this to you, it'll say version 2 on it. And I think that's it. 34 seconds left. Thanks.
Thank you. Sorry.
Hi, John McGowan, Churchville. I didn't know there was a timer here the first time. I've been working with kids since 1968. I believe a couple of things, trailers, they have to go first. I know a teacher in Sodderton, I think, or Quakertown School District, where they voted for a 5-year contract in order to prevent layoffs, and their concession was about a 1% pay raise each year, and more contributions towards their pension and health care benefits. I haven't heard anything mentioned about that. We could ask our teachers' union to get involved with Mr. Klein and the board and give them ideas on how they could contribute some concessions towards, to keep costs down on, and also maybe to prevent layoffs. We could consider turning Richboro Middle School, if they're going to close it, into a teen center, which I've been advocating for 20 years, and a rec center. It's used, if I go over there, those two schools across the street from each other are used every weekend with thousands of children, thousands, okay? And you could also possibly turn part of it into the school into a place for the alternative education for children who just aren't going to get it, but you want them to graduate. As far as the 6th graders with 8th graders, Churchville Elementary in 5th grade, they changed classes once, okay, to prepare them for 6th. 6th grade, they changed classes multiple times. It's the most fantastic thing. My 2 granddaughters, I love it, okay? And I agree with you, the 6th graders with 8th graders is not a good idea. In my one granddaughter's 6th grade class, they have a boy with special needs, I mean real special needs, and they protect him. They've had him since kindergarten. They protect him. What would happen if he was in 6th grade in the middle school and they're all separated? You have to think about all of these things. I hear more talk about money and the cost today versus tomorrow. Our number one reason for being here, mine anyway, is because of my grandchildren, okay? And the children that are going to be affected. Not how much money we will save by making a decision by the November meeting. I care more about doing it right. There's 2 other little things. If we don't learn from the mistakes of the past, we're bound to repeat them. A lot of people did research. Okay, they brought it up. And the last is the race between the tortoise and the hare. Okay? The rabbit should have won the race. He went too fast, made too many mistakes. Okay? The turtle won the race because he went real slow and sure. Thank you. And I'm done on time.
Thank you, sir.
See you in 40 years.
Melissa Williams, Wrightstown, Newtown. This is strictly public comment from taxpayer, parent, 6 to 8. I also did a little research on that. It looks bad. It feels bad from the perspective of a parent. You worry with K through 6 that your kindergartner is with 6th graders. They talk about things that a kindergartner should not be hearing. I was at first a little unsure of Jenny's plan. I have come to love it and find that I haven't found a parent yet who doesn't love it, and I haven't found a taxpayer yet who doesn't love the fact that it saves. I know there's still unanswered questions about it, and I'm glad that the board is interested in those and is going to explore it. I believe I saw on our list up there that that is on there for a model to be done. I hope that's the case. I'm not entirely positive. I think 5th and 6th grade centers. Okay, excellent. Full-day kindergarten, I happen to be lucky enough and also penny pinching enough to stay home with my kids. It was a decision we made before we had children. I disagree with full-day kindergarten just as a parent, and that's strictly me not having talked to other parents yet about it. I know that other people do have to work, but I feel that is more of a parent's choice, and I can't believe that the board members that I'm agreeing with today and disagreeing with today are different from Thursday and the week before that. So I'm also really glad to see that, just to see open-mindedness and moving forward. I love that. But for me personally, I think kindergarten, it's for a full day is extremely long to expect. I know it's also a choice to send your kid to kindergarten or not, but I would hate to see in a financial crisis us put money towards something that I think is a parental choice. And you can make the choice to find daycare or family or whatever else to help you with that in a lot of cases. I know there are also plenty of families that that's a hard decision for. So again, I don't represent everyone. I think I'm coming. Just for the 6 to 8 and the 5 and 6 centers, I do have one younger child and one older child. We left a big gap between our kids, so I do feel for both of those, as in, you know, the having one coming nearer to that 6-year mark and one not even in school yet. So I really do feel strongly that 6 to 8 is a bad range of grades to be together, and that the breakup with the 5 to 6 really is awesome. And just to point out, Jenny's little mistake that I happened to find actually upped our savings. It didn't decrease them. Just to make sure it's clear. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Lisa Mernicki, Wrightstown, Newtown. I want to thank the board. I'm new to coming to the meetings, and it's obvious how much time you guys have put into coming with plans. But something that I never thought about, which is the gentleman earlier that was talking about the Catholic school system. My parents moved us to Holland in 1974. My brother and sister went to Rolling Hills. There was a general consensus of a negative perception of that school, and dozens of people in our community pulled their kids out and put them in the St. Bede's. So my brother, my sister, and myself were educated in St. Bede's because of the pod room concept. So I find it very interesting. I don't know what people feel like today, but my girlfriend moved her children from Holland to a different school district, and one of the reasons she did was the open pod concept. There were no trailers, there was no discussion of being overcrowded. So being in Wrightstown, we're a small community, and again, what you said, how if the school needs to be closed because of financial reasons, I understand the logic. But my problem I'm having trouble with is I've heard my whole entire life this negative perception of Rolling Hills. And would there be a way to change that classroom concept? Parents today sometimes mention they don't want their kids in pods. They want them in a classroom. So I just thought I would bring that up because my whole entire life has always been this perception that Rolling Hills is maybe not the greatest environment with the pods for the kids to learn. I'm not a teacher. I'm just someone who was a student whose parents were not happy with that pod system, and dozens of parents in Holland pulled their kids out into St. Bede's because of that reason. Thank you for your time.
I'd like to apologize for the Chief parents. They really had a difficult time carving out 3 hours to be here at this meeting. So they asked me would I just basically do some snapshots here. First off, the parents are requesting a meeting with Mr. Klein to discuss placement options as early as this week. They would also like to be a part of a process, not a final decision. They are looking at development of a strategic plan, a long-term strategic plan for this program. They would like to recommend to this board that this program holds collectively 18 outstanding IEPs, and there is a need to finalize date and time where these students are going. They'd also like to say thank you for those board members who advocated so passionately today for this program. They'd like to say thank you. And for the other individuals who said nothing, they're more than willing to speak to you directly. Last but not least, I just want to remind the board that I sat where you're sitting for 12 years. I worked very closely with facilities. As a taxpayer, I am shocked that for 6 years we essentially paid a great deal of money to store trash. I had pictures on my iPad that if any one of these board members saw, they would absolutely be horrified. And the reason being, because we have a policy, we can't get rid of anything. So we have a multitude of trash in this school district that we're hoarding from place to place to place. So I would encourage every single board member to find out what the cost of our storage facilities are and what kind of equipment we're having throughout this district, because it's problematic. Last but not least, I'm not sure if this board is even aware that this time last year, the spring, a anonymous benefactor came forward and offered the school district a rental facility lease to purchase. They would lease the space. They would then ultimately purchase this project for this program. That benefactor was told, no, they weren't interested. The school district wasn't interested. I'm wondering if any of the board members were even aware of this. No? Well, that's my final closing statement. So I thank you for your time, and I really believe this group of individuals need to have a timely answer on this. Thank you.
Steve McGill, Holland, PA. I looked at the number of motions that were up there and the number of questions that were up there. And just mentally, as we were going through this, and I've thought about this routinely over the last several meetings, and I think that this is not about any specific recommendation. I think that this board, years ago, in another lifetime it seems, spent inordinate amounts of time trying to decide how to do budgets and dealing with finances, zero-based budgeting, a gazillion chart of accounts line items, and up and down, and back and forth and around. It was a nightmare. Okay, it seems today that we have some pretty good ideas of financial modeling, and with some of the new members on the board, like Mr. Bialik, it's getting better. I think the idea of zero coupon bonds as a part of your portfolio is something you really need to look at. I think there's some real merit to that. But that's off the point. I go back to modeling. Modeling is, as a concept, is the idea of being able to take key components of what's facing you, and doing a small scale so that you can see the ramifications of it and uncover potential threats or opportunities that at first blush do not show up. And so, just as we do in finance now, Bob is asked to do a myriad of these things. I think you need to do that with your enrollments too. We have a standard for class size at various levels, okay? It gets bigger as kids get older, which is fine. If that's what the board likes, that's fine. But there are other key variables that there are no standards for, and they include grade configurations, sending districts, and so forth. There are probably a couple others that I don't know about. I think it is time for the board to adopt some standards around grade configurations and around the modeling of those variables. In other words, redistricting is an event, and we haven't had that event for 14 years. I learned it's a little more specific than what I knew before. But there is no reason why you can't model redistribution in a number of different ways, taking those variables. The other thing I think you need to set a standard on is your capacity. When you build a manufacturing facility, it has what is referred to as a nameplate capacity, all right? And there are times when you're under capacity. It includes things like maintenance and downtime for renovations and refitting, all right? There is also times when you will run into overcapacity. You will run at overcapacity if you're in an emergency situation, things like that. If this board adopts those kind of modeling variables and puts it into place, you will eliminate all of this conversation about, well, I think this and I think that and so forth. And you will eliminate the need for people like Mrs. Schuttmuller to do the kind of yeoman work that she did. You've got an instrument to do these kind of distributions on a modeling basis. It should be a routine part of your meetings or of your process, not, the boogeyman that comes out every once in a while. And so I leave you with that. I also think that it's time for these discussions to become part of your parliamentary procedure. In other words, you should make motions and discuss motions, and then either vote them down, vote them through, table them, or withdraw them. That's what parliamentary procedure is around, and I think it would reduce a lot of the confusion for the public about who said what and why and when. And the lack of motions in your meetings, I think, it degrades the quality of your information. Thank you.
Amy McIntyre with Newtown. Going kind of off of that with regards to the capacities, I've heard several times over the past couple of weeks that there's some insecurity about the accuracy of the Schrader capacity study, and I think Jenny made a really good recommendation last week, or Thursday, to ask the principals if they're accurate. Can you use classrooms that aren't designated as such for general education? Because that's a game changer if we're under the wrong impression with that, and that would be a way to get that answer. I didn't say this on Thursday, but if we're not going to do a snail mail, I would still like to ask either our superintendent or our board president to consider sending an email to all the daycares, the preschools, the Newtown Athletic Club, other ways to freely reach large numbers of people who may not be on our listserv, who aren't yet in our district but would care. And I know it's mind-numbing that there are still people that are unaware of this whole process, but it is a fact. I think I'm a little confused when I hear Mrs. Sexton say that when her children were in Rolling Hills, there was way more children, and it's currently a very underutilized building when it has 5 trailers with children learning in them today. I don't really understand. So if it's underutilized, the kids should be inside. So I don't. Yeah. So I really actually agree with what Mr. Bialik brought up about the minimal cost to renovate versus the rebuild, and I like Mr. Grupp's idea of isolating concepts so that you can move forward, but they're not in isolation. So if you want to move IT into North, you're saying we don't want to redistrict and bring the population up to North. We can use that availability in other ways. And then like what Jenny said, which is great, then you don't have to build a bigger Newtown Middle. You can build a smaller Newtown Middle. So it really isn't in isolation. It has an implication, and I like a minimal renovation, because now, especially if we don't need to put more kids into Newtown Middle, it's a significant savings. And Mrs. Brooks said there's no trailers on the north side. Wrightstown Elementary School has 5 trailers with kids. Newtown Middle School has 5 trailers with kids right now. And Mrs. Thomas said that really smart people worked on these proposals, and they worked for a long time, and then that just gives validity to considering the ideas. And they are really smart people, and they did work really long. But one of the main bases for their plans were the projections, which we're already finding are rather off. So I think it's prudent to look at the current figures. So in closing Wrightstown would be sad, but that hasn't been our point ever. It would be expensive. It would perpetuate overcrowding in the other elementary schools. It is a perceived detriment of quality of education in our district. And the simple fact is that Wrightstown Elementary School plays a critical role in educating hundreds of young children in our district, and it does that very, very well.
Adrian Vance from Wrightstown. I had no intentions of speaking at all today. I thought I was doing good just getting up, being here on my one day to sleep in. There's been a lot at this meeting, and I can see through the board members that you all still feel like you have questions and you're all over the place. My background is I was actually a teacher. I have a dual education degree in special education and in elementary education. I taught for 13 years in Florida at an A school that was considered an A school by their standards, and yet I still made my husband leave his Orlando job and our SeaWorld passes and my A rating school to move my daughter back to here and have him working in Trenton with no beach and anything like that. So you can see how important that we considered Council Rock School District to be. My daughter, I'm taking this on a personal note regarding to the 6th to the 8th grade. My daughter turned literally 8 on the first day of school for 3rd grade. She is the youngest girl in her class. She will always be the youngest girl in her class. She closed on the cutoff date. The idea of, for me, to have a child that is a girl too, turning 11 to 12 in a school with 15 and 16-year-olds is scary. I mean, like other parents, I'm concerned about things she already hears just from fellow classmates that may be a little older than her, let alone significantly older. And there have been educational studies that show that it does present some problems as far as developmental for the students. And there is a quote, the author escapes me, but it says, the hallmark of a great leader is not giving good answers, but asking the right questions. We have so many questions today. We seem so all over the place, which is a good thing that we have all these questions, but I'm concerned that we're just piling on things and we're not clearing anything up. And I would like answers, but I think when we started discussing the full-time kindergarten, I had a growing concern because that only showed up on one proposal, the 3rd proposal. It didn't have numbers on it, and the recommendations also in the 3rd proposal were to build a stadium. Well, I don't know. It just seems logical to me. If I'm having problems with my household budget, I'm not going to consider cutting expenses with my cable bill, phone bill, and food groceries so I can put a swimming pool in my backyard. That doesn't make logical sense. And considering the other two proposals, and even Jenny's proposal, don't include full-time kindergarten because it is not a viable option with all these other crisis issues at the time, I'm a little unclear on why we're still asking the particular questions for that item, when I think there are bigger priorities and issues to be addressed. And kindergarten is a priority for children, but that's an independent parent priority too. My child, she never went to preschool. She did half-day kindergarten at Wrightstown, flew through fine, and I think parents also need to take the responsibility. It's their children. They need to take the responsibility of raising their children and not lay that on the school district. The school is responsible for their education. And I can say that coming from both ends, from being the teacher and the parent, that we can't use full-time kindergarten and drain that on our already tight budget when we have other issues, and parents need to step up and find the ways. If they're going to have children, they need to consider how they're going to raise and be fiscally responsible for those children. Thank you.
Marilyn Scarpa, Newtown Township. I too am distressed that we're discussing full-day kindergarten at this time. I was on committee for Plan 1, Committee 2. I'm confused about that, how that worked out. But we did discuss this at length. I mean, our proposals were bullets and a consolidation of what we discussed in our committees. But we discussed that at length. And there were so many reasons against us pursuing that. For you to have the administration look at that and add time to all what they already have on their plate, that also convolutes you moving forward with some of these other decisions, like the last speaker just said, that it seems like you're putting more on your plate than less, and having a more difficult time of actually making a decision. So I am very distressed about that. And another thing, I agree with Mr. Bialik 100%. How about that? That I appreciate your saying. I believe there are 5 votes here to vote to move forward to build a new Newtown Middle School. And while you keep revisiting this and spreading it out all over, there are certain people that have been very vocal that they're against that. That's fine. But I believe there are 5 people to vote on this, and you can move forward and stop belaboring this for poor Mr. Taylor and everybody else, and move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for everyone's time and efforts today.
Board comment?
I'm sorry, okay, board comment.
Sorry.
I thought we had enough time to comment.
Sorry.
Silly me.
We got 3 minutes here. The comment was made, Mr. McGill had asked that these meetings should have parliamentary procedure. I just want to remind the public, this board doesn't meet outside of the public view. This board can only meet in the public view as a group of 9. Other groups I know have work sessions. This was, while we elected to have it televised and sit in this forum in this manner today, as evidenced by the easels, although we used the electronic version.
Well, we were going to use them, but we used the electronic.
Right, exactly, although we used the electronic version. This was intended to be a work session, kind of a clarification section for the board to talk through and get better direction around these things and dedicated to that purpose. That there will be motions coming, true, but for right now, it was really intended to be a work session. So what you see is a bit of a melange of work and board sitting. Lastly, to the Newtown Middle discussion, I don't disagree with Mr. Bialik. I think there is some aspect, though, of allowing some of the questions that existed to mature or to get answers. While it could go through on a 5-4 vote now, potentially, the Newtown Middle School, yeah, I'm fine with that. But I thought there was some notion of allowing other board members to become comfortable with it. But you're right, at some point you have to just, call the question and make action, and maybe we'll do that. But that was the rationale. It wasn't, this board oftentimes could come forward with a 5 vote on something and push it through. And occasionally we do, and often we do. But it also goes towards recognizing that we work as a group of 9. And to the commentary and my last was, I'm glad you see that this board isn't coming to the table as fixed amalgams and fixed cohesive little groups that vote as a pocket. I'm very proud of this board. This board votes almost universally that every item that comes forward is judged on its own individual merit, and the board individuals vote on it, and the next item comes up, and again is considered on its individual merit. There is not coalitions. I don't perceive the coalitions on this board that say, well, therefore we're against it. This board has been functional for that reason. So I'm glad that you see that demonstrated as you sit there and agree with some people and disagree with them on the next topic. That's the way we work, and I'm very proud of that aspect.
Okay. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Hey, have a good lunch.
Trying to get out before Jerry says something else. Yeah.
Please leave.